Chapter 589. Unrestrained expansion. A short-winded cough came from Ku Yun's mouth as the blood drained from his face. The other man paled considerably when he saw Jian Chen pierce straight through Ku Yun's chest. With a loud shout, a large amount of his sword chi began to fly out to strike down the countless pieces of rubble flying at them. Then, with his saint weapon hoisted overhead, the man flew to attack Jian Chen to save Ku Yun. Jian Chen turned to look at the man with a cold smile appearing on his lips. "Was it you that told me to come on out? Don't even think about leaving here today alive." Jian Chen pulled out the origin energy sword from Ku Yun's chest and shot toward the second man like a bolt of lightning. Clink! Upon contact with the azure and violet beam of light, the saint weapon of the other heaven saint master let out a cracking sound. A piece of it broke off. Against the azure and violet sword spirits, the saint weapon of a heaven saint master may as well be as strong as a roof tile. With his saint weapon damaged, the elder was seriously injured and spat out a mouthful of blood as well. Jian Chen's hand did not slow down after the first blow. He swiftly moved his wrist to deliver his second slash with a speed like lightning. Under the powerful muscles of his arm, the sword traveled so fast that only the reflection of the blade was seen. Before the other man could even understand what was happening, the origin energy had stabbed into his forehead. It pierced out the back of his head, extinguishing his soul and killing him completely. Bala! Ku Yun howled in grief and sorrow when he saw his friend pierced through the head. He knew that the Blue Wind Kingdom had lost yet another Heaven Saint Master. With the origin energy stabbing straight into Ba-La's head, his spirit was utterly vanquished. The light in his eyes vacated and his body started to drop back down to the ground. With hands as quick as his eyes, Jian Chen palmed Ba-La's space ring before turning back to speak to the anguished Ku Yun. "I was planning to kill you, but I think I'll spare your life. Go back to your king and tell him that it'd be in his best interest to not interfere with the matters of the Flame Mercenaries. If he refuses to listen, then do not blame me for what happens next." Even as he spoke, the origin energy formed by the azure and violet sword spirits faded from sight. The muscles in Ku Yun's face twitched irregularly as he stared down this youth in front of him with a mixture of fear and shock. Even his voice quavered when he delivered his next line. "The war between the Jessen Kingdom and the Blue Wind Kingdom is finished, and we've doled out hefty compensation already. There is neither grievances nor hatred between you and Bala. What reason did you kill him for? A loose tongue causes plenty of troubles. You should remember in the future that less is more. Leave now, and don't forget to tell your esteemed king what I've told you." Laughing, Jian Chen turned to descend from the sky back to the inn. Still in mute shock, Ku Yun remained floating in the air, desolately looking at the dead corpse of Bala down in the streets. His corpse had not moved at all other than from the still-spreading pool of blood. A crowd of people had formed around the corpse, and not a single one of them could believe what they saw. Dropping down from the sky, Ku Yun took Ba-La's corpse with him and immediately left the cloud capital. When they arrived in the cloud capital, the two of them had made an aggressive entrance. In the end, only one of those men left the city alive. With the battle between Heaven Saint Masters finally finished, the entire city was left as still as a ghost town. Mercenaries and merchants alike stared at the sky in mute shock and disbelief, even though not a single Heaven Saint Master remained. A dozen figures were already running to the spot where Bala had landed with as much speed as they could muster. Just barely stopping around the blood-stained spot, each one of them revealed a sluggish expression on their faces. Included in this group was the Lord of the Cloud Capital and several of the other leaders of the strongest factions. What was unknown, however, was what was running through their minds at that moment. Jian Chen had already returned to the inn and onto the bed he had been sitting on before. The only difference this time was that a hole could be seen in the ceiling above him. Ming Dong and the others were already back in the room, so when Jian Chen descended, Bai Lian came flying past the doors to greet Jian Chen excitedly. "Wow. Brother, you're amazing. Even the two Heaven Saint Masters of the kingdom were beaten by you." Bai Lian spoke. She looked up to Jian Chen with great big eyes of adoration. A single person being able to defeat two Heaven Saint Masters working in tandem without a single scratch was essentially an undefeatable entity to her. She was exuberant in her worship for Jianchen since he had been able to prevail against 2 Heaven Saint Masters by himself without being hurt at all. A feat like this was practically on the same level of an unbeatable being. Something like this was more than enough to make her realize in this moment that her older cousin was a far stronger person than she had initially thought. Wrong, he killed one and injured one. If Jianchen didn't let that second one live, then neither of the two would have left this place alive. Ming Dong corrected her. Bai Lian was even more elated to hear what Ming Dong said. She rated Jianchen higher on the pedestal now. Even Yu Yu by Jianchen's side revealed a slight tint of infatuation in her eyes. However, she looked up at the hole in the ceiling above Jianchen and softly said, "Jianchen, perhaps we should change rooms since you put a hole in the ceiling." Jianchen looked up at the hole he had created with an embarrassed smile. "Yes, perhaps I should change rooms." Looking back at the ruined ceiling, Jianchen gave an embarrassed smile. "Perhaps we should." Not a single person within this room had bothered to pay attention to what was happening outside of the room. Thus, they were unaware of the pandemonium that was happening right now. The hottest topic in the city was about the fact that the captain of the Flame Mercenaries had successfully beat back 2 Heaven Saint Masters sent from the kingdom all by himself, and the fact that he had managed to kill one of them while injuring the other was something that everyone clearly witnessed. With that said, practically everyone within the city was in an uproar. Having witnessed this sight, news of what transpired in the sky above the city spread throughout the entire kingdom with great speed. Within practically half a day, every nook and cranny of the kingdom would know about this groundbreaking news. The leaders that stood on top of the Blue Wind Kingdom would take this news seriously and would later send out their strongest to verify the truth of the rumors. With everything said and done, the Flame Mercenaries would cement their position within the Blue Wind Kingdom. The fact that the Flame Mercenaries had been able to subjugate an entire first-class city was enough to have the eyes of many on them, but the fact that this new situation had happened made everyone terrified at their strength. Within the palace of the Blue Wind Kingdom, Ku Yun held the dead body of his companion Bala within the halls where the king sat. Slowly, Ku Yun narrated what had happened to them both in the cloud capital while also describing Jianchen to the king. As soon as the entire story was recounted to him, the king sighed. In that sigh, he seemed as if to have aged years in a single moment. For a while, the king was quiet before he finally spoke once more. "As we are powerless to stop them, it is pointless to even try anymore. Our Blue Wind Kingdom had already grown weak because of the war. With this happening, our power is doomed to drop even further." Several days later in the cloud capital, a long procession of people passed through the gates of the city. Every single banner that was flown around this group displayed the exact same emblem of a circular sphere of fire. This group of people all belonged to the Flame Mercenaries. The Flame Mercenaries of today were definitely on a whole different scale than before. In the past, it had been a single person, but now, it had expanded to over 5,000 people, becoming the strongest group of mercenaries within the Blue Wind Kingdom. Their cumulative strength was more than enough to contend with any other faction in the kingdom. Leading the group at the very front was Jianchen, Ming Dong, Tai Ta, Du Gufeng, Yu Yu, and Bai Lian. Each one of the 6 were seated on top of their own magical beast mount, but this time, they were no longer riding a Class 3 magical beast. They were now seated on top of a Class 4 magical beast. All of their mounts had been graciously donated by the heads of the faction they had just recruited. By now, every single person had accepted their newfound status in the group and were now earnestly working for the Flame Mercenaries as a whole. Having a powerhouse like Jianchen as their support wasn't an easy thing to find, and by joining the Flame Mercenaries, they could earn the chance to win the Earth Tier battle skill they had always dreamed of. They could even get a Heaven Tier battle skill that even Heaven Saint Masters would drool over. These 3 factors combined were a tremendous temptation to them. Even if the heavens were to drop a meat pie in front of them, it would not be as alluring. If anyone were to tell them that a Heaven Saint Master was capable of absorbing life from them, they would not care. All in all, they were not regretting their new way of life. Most felt delighted to greet this change and did not feel displeased at all. "Captain, where will we go next from here?" Zhang Tian asked from the side. "Tianlong City isn't too far away, let's go there." Jianchen replied. In a short few days, the Flame Mercenaries had experienced a period of expansion with no restraint. Just like that, a first-class city had found itself annexed into the Flame Mercenaries, exponentially increasing their power. After the entire matter with the Cloud Capital ended, the Flame Mercenaries possessed about 300,000 members and almost 100 Earth Saint Masters, leaving the Blue Wind Kingdom practically desolate of its stronger population. The Blue Wind Kingdom had no solution for the growth of the Flame Mercenaries. They had no one to stop them. They had no way to even try. All the king could do was sit within the halls of his palace with a miserable expression as he watched the Flame Mercenaries grow stronger and stronger while his kingdom grew weaker and weaker. By the time the strongest factions of the Blue Wind Kingdom had heard what Ku Yun had told the king, they were all absolutely convinced that the captain of the Flame Mercenaries could not be angered at any costs. For that reason, none of the factions came forward to stop the expansion of the Flame Mercenaries, and some of them had even prepared themselves to be annexed into the group as well. Chapter 590. A friend has come in the blink of an eye. 2 months passed. During these 2 months, the Flame Mercenaries had exponentially expanded and earned a place as one of the strongest mercenary groups in the Blue Wind Kingdom. A group that stood on top of the other leading factions and even the royal palace itself. Up to this point, only the strongest families and factions had been able to prevent themselves from being subjugated by Jianqin. A large mansion was situated at the very center of a first-class city called Wanzhou City. This mansion had originally belonged to the strongest power within that city, but had now been reclaimed to become the living area of the Flame Mercenaries for the time being. Even the name board at the very front had been swapped for the emblem of the Flame Mercenaries. At this current moment within the magnificent halls of the mansion, Jian Qin and the strongest 100 members were all gathered around a table to discuss several important matters. For the moment, the rest of the mercenaries were all stationed outside the city in a clearing since they could not all enter the city at the same time. Captain, only 3 out of the 6 strongest families in the Blue Wind Kingdom were willing to join our Flame Mercenaries. The other 3 would rather die than submit. Zhang Tian dutifully reported. He was one of the first to join the Flame Mercenaries and was also one of the 3 Earth Saint Masters from the Carnage Mercenaries, and had been given the right to speak for the entire group. From his seat at the very front of the table, Jianqin revealed a small grin on his face as he took in the news from Zhang Tian. 3 of them were willing to submit. I see. Not bad, I wasn't expecting as much at first. Which 3 have agreed? Not long after he finished speaking, 2 middle-aged men and an elder come walking over with respectful salutes and greetings. This one is Shi Wanjun, representative for the Daong clan. We of the Daong clan would be happy to join the Flame Mercenaries and hope that we may follow the honorable captain into the brilliant light. This one is an Situ, representative of the Domineering Heaven sect. We would be happy to join the Flame Mercenaries. This one is Dick Perosi, delegate of the Shuelan clan. We are willing to join your Flame Mercenaries. These 3 men were all Earth Saint Masters at about the 4th or 5th cycle. The parties they represented were among the strongest powers in the Blue Wind Kingdom and once had a Heaven Saint Master presiding over them. However, those Heaven Saint Masters had been killed in the war with the Jesson Kingdom. Staring at the 3 humble and respectful men, Jianqin nodded his head in satisfaction. I welcome you into the family that is the Flame Mercenaries. From henceforth we are all family. As long as you work with the Flame Mercenaries in mind, then I, Jianqin, pledge to never treat any one of you wrong. I declare that the Daong clan, the Domineering Heaven sect, and the Shuelan clan will change their names to that of the Halls of Daong, Domineering Heaven, and Shuelan. And you 3 will still lead your respective hall. Jianqin had no desire to expunge any one of their power upon entry into the Flame Mercenaries. The only thing that would change would be their goals. Their relative power would remain untouched, but any sect or clan would be changed to a hall. 8,000 thanks for Captain's charity. The 3 men clapped their hands together in salute. All 3 of them had been worried that their authority would be stripped away from them the moment they joined the Flame Mercenaries. Sitting on his seat while deep thought, Jianqin said, Zhang Tian, take some people to Lust City and eliminate the Herido clan. A report for the captain. Rumors have it that the Harido clan vacated Lust City a long time ago. According to our same sources, they fled the Blue Wind Kingdom already. A black-robed elder spoke. What? They've already left the kingdom? Jian Chen's eyes narrowed for a moment before he waved his hand with a small smile. They act quite fast. If I had known that they would flee earlier, I would have moved to deal with them sooner. Captain, why don't we dispatch a team to chase after them? Zhang Tian asked. Giving it a second to think about, Jian Chen replied, no need. I will handle the Harido clan myself since they're no longer a threat to worry about. Unless their leader is able to become a Heaven Saint Master, they won't be able to do anything in the meanwhile. Even if he becomes a Heaven Saint Master in the next 20 years, our flame mercenaries will have grown strong enough to deal with them. Even if I'm not here, a single Heaven Saint Master won't be able to measure up to the strength of the entire flame mercenaries. They've decided to run away from the kingdom for now, so we don't even need to bother with them. Then, Captain, what shall we do about the 3 factions that chose death over submission? An elder asked from the side. Jian Chen leaned back in his chair while his fingers kneaded. He realized that leading the flame mercenaries was becoming more and more of a headache. It was no longer as easy as before where he could act as he pleased. Back then he was the only member and didn't require such heavy consideration. Everyone, why don't you inform me of your ideas? Jian Chen suggested. Captain, since the flame mercenaries have become so strong and those 3 factions refuse to submit, we shouldn't let things lie there. We should eliminate them all. Let them serve as an example to the world of our strength. Captain, we should avoid that at all costs. The remaining 3 factions still have 2 Heaven Saint Masters within their reach and a considerable amount of Earth Saint Masters. If those 3 join hands, then they will become an enemy that will deal a considerable amount of harm to us. Should we fight them, then we would anger even the kingdom itself. If they mobilize the entire army, then our flame mercenaries would suffer even more. Captain, those 3 factions are not to be belittled. We have no conflict with them, and even if they would rather die than submit, it is not worth going to war with them only to suffer a disastrous result. The ends do not make up for the means. Everyone came to different conclusions about how to handle the situation. On one hand, some wanted to eliminate the group. On the other hand, some wanted to forgive and let them be. From where she stood by the side, Bai Lian hesitated to speak for a brief second. Finally she gave her input. Brother, there is no conflict between us and the 3 factions. We don't have any real need to subjugate them, and we should forget about them for now since they're willing to die rather than to submit. With 2 Heaven Saint Masters, they'd cause a lot of damage if they join together since our flame mercenaries have no other Heaven Saint Master besides you, brother. Bai Lian and I share the same opinion. You agreed with her. Everyone grew quiet when the 2 of them spoke. They all knew that these 2 women were both very close to the captain, and thus they were not willing to say anything else. Jian Chen wasted no time to agree with the 2 of them. If that is so, we'll forget about this matter for now. Well, today's meeting shall end here then. You may all leave and make the preparations for whatever necessities you need. In 3 days we leave the Blue Wind Kingdom. Yes, Captain. Everyone agreed before leaving the halls. After the meeting was adjourned, Jian Chen returned to his own room. He lay down on the bed and closed his eyes. His fingers gently tapped against his temples. Now that the flame mercenaries had exploded in scale, it took even longer to consider and think everything through, causing Jian Chen some fatigue. Suddenly, the doors opened to reveal Yu wearing a pink long skirt as she walked into the room. When she saw Jian Chen rubbing his temples, she revealed a concerned look on her face. Jian Chen. She softly continued, managing the flame mercenaries is a tiresome task, isn't it? Yes. It really is quite tiresome. Now that the flame mercenaries have grown, there is far too much to consider and far too many factors to think about. It is only now that I realize how tremendous a task it is to manage such an enormous group. Aside from having an equally tremendous amount of power, one must not neglect being able to control and manage everything. Jian Chen replied while massaging his headache. Choosing to sit on a nearby chair, Yu said, "You could delegate these small affairs to someone else you know. There aren't many that I could trust. Aside from the group we travel with, there are no other capable people. Ming Dong is the vice captain, but I know his nature. He isn't cut out for something like this. Dugu Feng does not have the power, and Tai Ta is further away from such a position. The only ones left would be you and Bai Lian. Jian Chen sighed. Then his eyes flew open as he looked to Yu Yu. Yu Yu, I know that you've been an intelligent person since childhood and spent years learning in Kargath Academy while growing up in the palace. If I have you and Bai Lian govern the flame mercenaries, do you believe that you would be able to do the group well? Yu Yu was pleasantly surprised to hear the words that had come out of Jian Chen's mouth. What? Jian Chen, do you really think Bai Lian and I should be governing the flame mercenaries? Sitting up, Jian Chen faced her with an earnest expression. I do. If you have the ability to govern, then I would be willing to allow you to do so in my place. That would be great, Jian Chen. You may rest assured. Bai Lian and I won't let you down. Yu Yu excitedly replied. Just then, Ming Dong walked into the room. When he saw the happy Yu Yu by his side, Ming Dong stared suspiciously at Jian Chen. Brother, you've a friend here to see you. Who? Jian Chen asked. You'll know when you come. Ming Dong smiled mischievously. Suspicious of his actions, Jian Chen followed Ming Dong out of the room and into the open courtyards of the mansion with Yu Yu following him from behind. Soon enough, Jian Chen arrived at the gates to the building, but when he saw just who this familiar person Ming Dong had referred to, the expression on his face solidified into one of astonishment. The friend in question was Huang Luan. Chapter 591. Battle of Two Women. Stunned, Jian Chen stared at Huang Luan. She was standing by the gates, and then his eyes swung to Yu Yu standing right next to him. He felt the complaints inside his head grow so huge that they would take off his head. Not once did he ever think that Huang Luan would take the initiative to find him, especially when his fiancée was right next to him. One woman was someone he had some feelings for and once had a very close relationship with. The other woman was his fiancée that was known throughout the Jessen kingdom. Jian Chen didn't even know just how to treat this matter since this was the first time these two women had come into contact. Ming Dong clearly understood just what sort of trouble Jian Chen was in, but he had no intentions of helping him at all. Instead, he chuckled, Brother, I have some things to take care of, so I'll be leaving first. Ming Dong hadn't really meant what he said. He turned around just a few steps away to observe Jian Chen, Yu Yu, and Huang Luan with a smile on his face as if he was taking pleasure in the crisis befalling Jian Chen. Forcing a smile, Jian Chen asked Huang Luan, What brings you here? Today, Huang Luan was wearing a white-colored robe that accentuated her picture-perfect figure that only the devil could offer. Her figure possessed an allure that could seize the hearts of anyone with just a single motion. Her clothes were on point with how they had been tied. Not a single part of her robes was messed up. Compared to the clothing she had worn as the golden daughter of her clan, she looked like a heroic woman ready for travel. The icy-cold demeanor on Huang Luan's face had instantly softened the moment her eyes fell upon Jian Chen. Smiling, she said, Are you not going to welcome me in? Her voice leaked a feeling of close friendship. The forced smile was still on his face when Jian Chen addressed Huang Luan. Of course I will welcome you in. Please, come in and we can have a chat. Giving a sweet smile to Jian Chen, she tossed down the reins in her hand and followed him in. The guards at the gates were members of the flame mercenaries, so they immediately rushed in to take the mount away. Stopping in front of Jian Chen, she eyed his handsome face with a tender-hearted smile. She was just about to say something when, all of a sudden, she realized that there was another beautiful woman standing right next to Jian Chen. Eyeing her with some confusion, she asked, Jian Chen, who's this? Hello, I am Yu Yu. Yu Yu answered first. There was a smile on her face, but in her heart, there was a sour feeling. The feelings Huang Luan had for Jian Chen were obvious to see. Hence, she was able to infer that the connection between the two was close. Yu Yu? Could you be the Grand Princess to the Jessen Kingdom? Huang Luan asked her in shock. She nodded in response. Correct, that is I. Might I ask who you are? The light in Huang Luan's eyes changed when she regarded Yu Yu now. There was a darker tint of light that seemed to contain some jealousy just barely hidden in them. I am Huang Luan, a member of the Huang family. Ah, Miss Huang Luan, which kingdom are you from? I have heard of the Huang family before, but which clan it is something I know not. Yu Yu smiled softly. I'm afraid to disappoint the princess, but my Huang family is affiliated with no kingdom. We live in the mountains and rarely encounter the surrounding kingdoms or any other family that might share our surname. Huang Luan replied. Sensing the hidden steel to their tones, Jianchen felt his headache grow bigger and bigger. Why don't we walk inside first and continue our talks there? He pressed. Jianchen, Yu Yu, and Huang Lan were all seated around a circular table in a splendid and magnificently decorated room. Huang Lan was excited to see Jianchen and talked to him non-stop about the flame mercenaries with great curiosity. Whenever she asked another question, Jianchen answered truthfully without leaving any mystery behind. Huang Luan's eyes brightened at this moment as if she had remembered something. Looking to Jianchen, she said, Jianchen, I've something to tell you. I've become the student to the patriarch of the Huanggu clan. They're even willing to teach me their scriptures of the aqua sunflower, a saint-tier cultivation method. What? A saint-tier cultivation method? Jianchen was astounded. Although cultivation methods weren't as wanted as a battle skill, a saint-tier one was priceless despite that. Extremely rare and sparse, only the most isolated of hermits would have these cultivation methods. It is a cultivation method for those with the water affinity, something I coincidentally possess. Because of this, I learned it and cultivated the cultivation method for a small moment. In just 2 months, I was able to bring up my powers so fast that I went from a first cycle Earth Saint Master to a second cycle Earth Saint Master. It won't be long until I become a third cycle Earth Saint Master, and with this rate of progress, becoming a Heaven Saint Master won't even take too many years. Huang Luan's face was filled with unrestrained excitement. Yu Yu felt shock grip her heart right by Jianchen's side. She had not thought that this wildly dressed Huang Luan would be an Earth Saint Master despite the close similarity in age to her own. Not only that, she too did not expect to hear that she was learning a saint-tier cultivation method, something that was only mentioned in legends. Not too long later, Yu Yu managed to restrain her emotions and maintain her calm demeanor. From what she heard, this Huang Luan was definitely someone high in status and was possibly one of those golden daughters belonging to a tremendous family. Not only was her talent at cultivation higher than her own, Huang Luan was already an Earth Saint Master at her age while Yu Yu wasn't. Lastly, Huang Luan had managed to find a teacher that imparted a saint-tier cultivation method onto her. This meant that she was practically superior in every single aspect, and even with Yu Yu's status of a princess, she paled in comparison to Huang Luan. Jianchen noted the change in Yu Yu's demeanor with some concern. He immediately broke off the conversation and called for someone to prepare Huang Luan and room. He then dismissed everyone. Even after leaving the room, Yu Yu felt extremely depressed. Walking by herself to her own room, she sat on top of the bed and stared despondently at the wall across from her. The doors to her room slowly opened to reveal Jianchen gently making his way into the room. Jianchen felt his heart clench when he saw how Yu Yu was faring. Closing the doors behind him, Jianchen walked over to Yu Yu and sat down beside her. Studying her face with great concern, Jianchen was about to say something, but then he realized he had no idea just what words he could possibly use to comfort her. He sighed. Jianchen was not someone who understood how to speak with flowery speech, and in a situation like this, he was utterly powerless. There was a gleam to her eyes when Yu turned to look at Jianchen with a miserable expression, but it was because of the reflection of the light on the layer of water that was welling up in her eyes. At last, 2 teardrops formed just enough to flow down her beautiful face before they splashed on the ground. Jianchen panicked at the sight of her teardrops, but before he could speak, Yu Yu beat him to the punch. Jianchen, tell me. Were your words before about you having no time for women a lie? You were unwilling to wed me before, was it because there was already another woman in your heart, a woman who is far superior than I am? She was heartbroken, and her voice was threatening to break into a sob. In all honesty, her heart felt nothing but love for Jianchen, and that's why she found it heartbreaking to be in such a situation. When Huang Luan showed up today, the deep feelings she felt for Jianchen were completely obvious, visible even to the naked eye. Combined with the fact that she was superior in every way to Yu, the princess felt this other woman's presence as a tremendous threat that could steal away the man she loved. Pulling at Yu's hands, Jianchen clutched them with great intimacy as he softly said, Yu, it isn't what you think it is. The reason why I wasn't in a hurry to wed you was because I wasn't ready to settle down. I have not yet resolved the problems that weigh on my shoulders, and if I don't resolve them before I start a family, then it will only bring everyone harm. I won't hear this. I don't want to hear these lies. Just how many times have you said these words? Yu began to cry. At a loss for words, Jianchen looked at Yu. From the very start of their relationship, Yu had given him the feeling of someone that was always calm, but this was the very first time he had ever seen Yu cry her heart out. This was something he felt a great deal of pain over. He sighed once more. He had to be honest with Yu, else he would only hurt her more. Yu, although it may seem as if I am invincible on the surface as a heaven saint master and an imperial protector of one of the 8 great powers on the continent, my life is not as relaxed as you think it might be. I have many enemies that pose a threat to me still. Jianchen suddenly spoke before segueing into the hidden story of his life to her. Yu paused temporarily in her tears to fixate her eyes on him. In my years roaming the Tianyuan continent, I offended many families, and although some of them were killed off, there are still plenty of hidden factions that I have no way of fighting against. Among those families are the Shi family and the Jetta clan. These 2 factions are hermit clans on the continent with a vast amount of strength due to the fact that they have saint rulers ruling over them. Only death would absolve the grudges between those factions and me. If I am alive, they will not rest, and if they are not dead, I will never be safe. It is likely that those 2 clans have been searching for me ever since, and even if there is a long distance between the 2 of us, it is only a matter of time before they arrive here. The very moment they find out my identity, being the imperial protector of the Qinhuang kingdom won't be nearly enough to help me. Thus, I must improve my strength as much as I can. If I do not, then when the saint rulers come for me, I will die a pauper's death along with the family I have. Aside from those 2, there is still the sect of Dragon and Tiger from the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. They are a powerful sect to contend with, and their patriarch is a saint ruler that heavily desires a treasure of mine. Me being an imperial protector of the Qinhuang kingdom has beaten them back temporarily, but they will not stop at that. It remains to be seen just what sort of tricks the saint ruler might come up with to harm me. Staring solemnly at Yu, he continued, Yu, do you understand the overwhelming pressure that weighs upon my shoulders now? The enemies I've made are people of the saint ruler realm. As I am now, I stand no chance against them. Even escape is an impossibility. With how the odds are stacked, I have no idea just how much time I have left to live. However, this seemingly unimportant person made Jianchen stare at him seriously as if prepared to take action at any moment against an enemy. This person was practically undetectable to even Jianchen, and if it were not for his own eyes seeing the man, Jianchen would have overlooked the man entirely. The only ones capable of managing such a feat were hermits of the saint ruler level. Having a saint ruler suddenly appear in his very own room was something that made Jianchen nervous. Who are you? Jianchen questioned as he shifted his right hand behind his back to clench the jade piece in his hand. Since he could not fight against a saint ruler, then his only option was to ask for the assistance of the Huang patriarch. Ah, little brother, do not be nervous. This old man came for an impromptu visit. If I disturbed you, then please forgive me. An elderly voice came from the mouth of the blue-robed man. Yet, he remained seated at the table with his back still facing Jianchen. Sensing no hostile aura around the man, Jianchen eased up slightly while staring at the back of the man. Senior, who might you be? If you wish to know even that, then I'll tell you this. That girl Huang Luan has already told you about her having a teacher. That is me, I am her teacher. The man replied. Jianchen was astonished, and the look in his eyes reflected that astonishment. Could you be the patriarch of the Huanggu clan? Correct, that is I. With his identity confirmed, Jianchen let out a mental sigh of relief. Although a saint ruler was undoubtedly a tremendous source of pressure to him, at least this one was no enemy to him. Little brother, Come sit and let us talk. The man suggested. Easing back into the calm and easygoing nature of his, Jianchen strode to the seat on the other side of the man and sat down. Straight away, Jianchen could see the man's face. It was a very ordinary-looking face that was filled with wrinkles due to age. The only difference was that a single blue seal sat in the middle of his forehead, but it was hard to make out the picture in full clarity because of the wrinkles. The elder leveled a meaningful glance at Jianchen. Little brother, should I be calling you the imperial protector of the Qinhuang kingdom or the fourth master of the Changyang clan? Or perhaps, Jianchen? Senior, please just call me Jianchen. He smiled. The old man nodded his head just slightly. Then I shall do so. Jianchen, I am not one that enjoys beating around the bush, so I shall get to the point. He paused for a brief moment to take in a breath of air. Jianchen, I came here specifically because of Huang Luan, so the matter we will be discussing will relate to Huang Luan herself. Jianchen could feel his heart sink. Could this be about the betrothment between your Huanggu clan and the Huang family? Shaking his head, the elder replied, that matter has already been settled and dealt with. I won't even bother to try and harangue the matter any longer. Instead, I came here today to talk about her future. Senior, what might you mean by that? Jianchen asked, mystified at what the elderly figure was getting at. Humming, the elder thought for a moment, trying to find the best way to describe his thoughts. Huang Luan has a very particular body that comes once 1,000 years on the continent. If she were to train with a water affinity cultivation method, her growth would be exponential. For that reason, I bequeathed the Saint Tier cultivation method to her so that she could learn twice the amount for half the effort. Becoming a saint ruler wouldn't be difficult for her at all, but there is a single taboo she must not commit. Until she becomes a 6th cycle heaven saint master, she must remain pure at all costs. Otherwise, the effects she will receive will be irrevocably disastrous for her. The elder spoke with an increasingly grim voice. Jianchen had been listening on with the utmost seriousness, but when he heard what the patriarch said, he could not help but blush a little. Giving an embarrassed smile, he said, Senior, you may rest assured. The relationship between Huang Luan and I is nowhere near such a situation. That is good then. The man nodded his head in satisfaction. Jianchen, you should know that for the sake of Huang Luang's future, you must uphold her purity. This junior understands. Jianchen scratched his nose in embarrassment. He couldn't help but ask himself, was he really a person that wanted nothing but lust? With that said and done, the patriarch stood up from his stool. This old man has said all that he wanted to say, until we meet again then. The next moment, the patriarch disappeared from the room without a trace. Looking left and then right, Jianchen could see that the windows and doors to the room were still tightly shut. There was virtually no way to escape from this sealed space, and no crack or crevice to be seen. With those factors to be considered, Jianchen had to truly wonder how the patriarch had left. A saint ruler is truly powerful. The powers they possess are far beyond what I can imagine. Jianchen muttered with a twinge of jealousy. So Huang Luan's talent stems from her body itself. No wonder she was able to become an Earth Saint Master at such a young age. Several kilometers away, the patriarch of the Huanggu clan materialized out of thin air as if he had been a mirage. No longer teleporting here and there, the elder chose to instead fly the rest of the way at incredible speed. Now that I've told him that, he will most likely not see Huang Luan as a wife for now, leaving her body completely intact. Though, even if he wishes to do something unbecoming to her, the restriction I've placed on her will not let him get away. The elder smiled darkly as if he was plotting something. In the blink of an eye, a year passed. Chapter 593. A vein of tungsten alloy. Jianchen had to think about Dugufeng's proposal for a brief moment. He knew that there were plenty of mercenary groups that managed to construct their own cities after gaining enough power. It was only when a mercenary group founded their own city that they had the right to say they were someone important on the Tianyuan continent. Mercenary groups that owned a city were extremely strong, and the Flame mercenaries paled in comparison to the majority of mercenary groups in power. Although they had well over 100,000 members, the amount of people that were strong enough to assume responsibility over any single jurisdiction were far too few. Aside from Jianqin, there were only 3 other Heaven Saint Masters. If they were to try to construct a city like this, it would be insanely difficult to maintain their power. They would end up as the losers if their city was besieged. Not only was it common for kingdoms to fight with another for power, mercenaries would oftentimes move into cities and attempt to seize power almost as often. With those factors in mind, Jianqin finally made up his mind and said, "Our flame mercenaries might be strong in our area, but our strength is still limited to just this small area. We are not quite yet strong enough to attempt to build a city, so we should hold off for now." "I agree. Our group, the Flame Mercenaries, is quite strong, but there is still a huge threat of internal danger. Therefore, we should refocus our efforts in trying to resolve the matters with all of the members. We must ensure that the relationship between each and every mercenary is as tight as a twine of rope. Otherwise, the Flame Mercenaries that we built up with will crumble at the base and collapse sooner or later." Yu added her insight. "Is that so? Then why don't we spend the next period of time listening to you when dealing with internal matters? Yu, Bai Lian, I'll leave this to you to handle. If there is anything you need from me, go ahead and ask." Jianqin replied. In this short moment of time, the Flame Mercenaries had been left up to Yu and Bai Lian to administrate. After being tested for an entire year, Jianqin had seen more than enough to be convinced that the 2 of them were talented in this aspect. Bai Lian's cultivation talent was not unique. She hadn't even managed to form her saint weapon yet, but her keen wit and intelligence was unbelievably sharp. It was better honed than Yu's intelligence in several aspects. It was almost as if she was born to be a superior administrator. "A report for the captain, we've received a letter to give to you." At that moment, a single voice called out from outside. "Hand it over." "Yes." The flaps of the tent blew open as the white-robed Haranai came walking in. In his hand was a snow-white lightning bird. Taking the lightning bird from Haranai into his own hands, he untied the letter around its leg. He then unfurled it to read. "Important. Return to Changyang Manor." Only a meager few words had been scrawled on the letter, causing Jianqin's expression to become very grim. Taking note of the sudden change in expression, everyone nervously tensed up. It was Yu that finally asked out of concern, "Jianqin, what happened?" Jianqin studied the letter once more to verify that it wasn't a fake message. Then, slowly tearing it into several pieces, he explained, "A letter came from back home telling me to return to the Changyang clan. We'll have the mercenaries stay here for now and wait for my return. If something urgent happens, notify me by the twin jade stones." Bidding farewell to Yu and the others, Jianqin went and found the other 3 Heaven Saint Masters to give them their instructions. Afterward, he flew with great speed through the air back to Changyang Manor. By the time he arrived, it was already nightfall. As he began to descend to the ground, the Chang Wuji immediately made himself known. He was able to pinpoint him the moment he touched solid ground. "Fourth Master, you've returned rather quickly, I see." Chang Wuji smiled. Jianqin let out a secret sigh of relief when he saw the relaxed face of Chang Wuji. From the very start of his rush back home, he had been worried that something had happened to the family. "Chang Wuji, what has happened for you to ask me to come home at once?" Jianqin asked. "I do not know the details, but men from the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom came with a very important message to tell you. They said it was a matter that couldn't be delayed. Your father sent a message for you to return right away." The elder explained the best he could. Heavenly Eagle Kingdom? Did that kingdom not cease to exist? Jianqin tilted his head in confusion. Unable to stop himself from chuckling, Chang Wuji smiled at Jianqin. "Perhaps I should have phrased it differently. The 7 heads of the territories that once belonged to the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom came here with an important message for you. Fourth Master, they are currently in the discussion hall. We should head on over." Shortly after that, Jianqin and Chang Wuji entered the manor and headed straight for the main halls. On the way, plenty of guards saluted him while the maids and servants bowed down with the most respect they could muster. It did not take long for Jianqin to enter the halls themselves. He noticed that plenty of people were already gathered here. Most noticeable was his father and mother, the other important elders of the Changyang clan, and a sturdy-looking middle-aged man who was currently in deep discussion with someone else. The arrival of Jianchen was apparent to everyone. They lined up shoulder to shoulder and bowed to cordially greet Jianchen. At this moment, everyone in the halls was filled with respect for him. The middle-aged man that had been discussing stuff with everyone else came forward to bow and greet Jianchen personally. Captain of the Blood Moon Mercenaries, Tynes, pays his respects to the Imperial Protector. After the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom dissolved, it had been split into 7 partitions. The Blood Moon Mercenaries had subsequently become the overseers of one of those 7 partitions. Regaling the man, Jianchen said, "Tynes, what important matter was it that you needed to inform me of? What can you tell me about it?" Looking around the hall, Tynes hesitated to speak. "Imperial Protector, this is a matter of utmost secrecy, so," understanding his intentions, Jianchen replied, "If that is so, then we shall speak in my own residence." "Yes, Imperial Protector." Looking to his father, Changyang Ba, and his mother, Bai Yuntian, Jianchen said, "Father, Mother, your son has matters to take care of. I will be leaving first." Xiang'e, Captain Tynes has trekked countless of kilometers to run to the Changyang clan. If it is a serious issue, you needn't worry about your parents. Go and take care of what you need to do. Changyang Ba laughed. "Xiang'e, time is of the essence. Go and do what you must." Bai Yun Tian softly replied. A son that was as outstanding yet filial as Jianchen was a son that she felt an exorbitant amount of pride in. Exchanging several more words of greeting to the other members in the hall, Jianchen led Tynes back to his own building. "Tynes, what important matter do you have to tell me? Has the sect of Dragon and Tiger decided to mobilize against you?" Jianchen inquired with a solemn expression. Tynes shook his head and looked carefully around the place. Then, speaking into Jianchen's ear, he whispered, "Imperial Protector, we have discovered a tremendous deposit of tungsten alloy." "What? A tremendous deposit of tungsten alloy?" A spark glinted in Jianchen's eyes as he murmured to himself. Tungsten alloys were extremely sparse on the continent and worth several times their weight in purple coins. A single kilogram was already worth 10 kilograms worth of purple coins. "Yes, Imperial Protector, our Blood Moon mercenaries came across this vein in one of the mountains by pure accident. After further investigations, we found an even larger vein. Based off a shallow investigation, we concluded that the purity of the ore is at least 85%. Tynes' voice quavered. Jianchen felt a gasp escape his lips, and his heart began to beat even faster. A purity rate of 85% meant that out of 100 ores, 85 of them could be smelted into tungsten alloy. "How many people know about this place?" Jianchen suddenly asked. "I've killed off all those that knew this knowledge outside my group, meaning there's only 50 or so people that do. They are all confidences of mine, and I am sure that they will safeguard the secret of this vein as strictly as I." Tynes replied seriously. A sigh of relief escaped Jianchen's mind. A vein of tungsten alloy was practically an immeasurable source of wealth, since a single kilogram of tungsten alloy was worth 10 times its weight in purple coins. If news of this got out, then there would definitely be bloodshed over it. "Imperial Protector, this vein of tungsten alloy is extremely precious and tempting for any faction to give up. If news of this were to leak out, then we would have no power to protect it. Imperial Protector, how do you propose we handle this situation? Should we have the Qin Huang Kingdom oversee it?" After a careful moment of consideration, Jianchen replied, "If news of the vein has not been leaked out, then let it remain a secret in the meanwhile. Tynes, hurry back and see over it yourself for now. Have the other 7 factions join with you to protect it in secret and extract it in secret. Remember, the less people that know about this, the better. News of this cannot be divulged at any costs. I'll figure out what to do after." "Yes, Imperial Protector." Tynes bowed and cupped his hands in salute. "There's no time to waste, hurry back over." Chapter 594. Hurrying off to the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom, Tynes left for the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom straight away. With how precious the tungsten alloy was, he couldn't possibly dare try and be negligent over a plethora of wealth like that. There were no Heaven Saint Masters safeguarding it, so Jianchen felt some discomfort at this matter. He was afraid that the news would be leaked. Pacing around the middle of his room with his hands clasped behind his back, Jianchen's mind raced with ideas about how to deal with the tungsten alloy vein. Unknowingly, the small tiger cub had leaped onto his shoulder and stared at him. Its originally bright eyes had already grown dim, as if it was growing listless. It appears I must bring the flame mercenaries over to the territory of the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom, Jianchen concluded. After thinking to himself for another hour, Jianchen left his room to call his mother for a meal before leaving the Changyang clan. All sorts of dishes were placed in a beautiful arrangement on top of the table as Jianchen, Changyang Ba, Bai Yuntian, and the other 3 wives of his father sat together and talked. The fact that Jianchen was the captain of the flame mercenaries had already been revealed to his aunts, but it was still a very puzzling thing to think about how he was also the imperial protector of both the Qinhuang and Jessen kingdom. After a brief interrogation by his aunts, Jianchen explained everything without losing his temper. There were no secrets in regards to the flame mercenaries to his mother after all. Xianger, you've done the right thing. If Kendall saved you, then you must fulfill the promise you gave for it to be a fair trade. Changyang Ba approved. Xianger, in your times of travel outside, have you come across any news of your sister? Bai Yuntian suddenly blurted out. Jianchen could only shake his head with regret. He sighed. Auntie, your child has searched without end, but nothing of importance has come up. Yu Fengyan's face became more sorrowful at his words. Wretched girl, who knows what faraway place she has run off to? Why hasn't she even sent a letter back home? Even now, I have not one letter from her and not even a clue on where my Mingyue has gone. What if she? Halfway through her words, Yu Fengyan could no longer stop herself from descending into a fit of sobs. Her own daughter had left the clan one day without warning or trace, causing her to feel extremely anxious and scared for the well-being of her daughter. The table grew quiet after that. Each person seated there had a grim look on their face. Every person at this table, besides Jianchen, were either aunts or a parent to Changyang Mingyue and had seen her grow since birth. So her disappearance had been extremely worrisome to them all. Jianchen had disappeared once, but he had been of a different situation and had came back. Second aunt, please be at peace. Second sister has always been a lucky person. She won't come across any trouble. Look at me, I left the Jessen kingdom for several years by myself without anything harmful coming my way. Jianchen consoled her, but to no avail. Yu Fengyan and the others simply did not think that Changyang Mingyue had the same capabilities as Jianchen. A single woman traveling the continent by herself was a feat that was several times more dangerous than for a male. All sorts of unsavory mercenaries and bandits roamed the continent. It would not be uncommon for them to act upon their lust for women. Our daughter has grown up with a rebellious nature. We are to blame for that. If we did not try to force her into an arranged marriage, she would not have left home. Changyang Ba sighed bitterly with regret. Father, second aunt, please rest assured. I will definitely have my men scour the continent to find second sister. Jianchen resolutely pledged. When he was young, Changyang Mingyue had been very caring to him, and he had left the Changyang manor with a very favorable impression of her. The disappearance of Changyang Mingyue had left him feeling very melancholic. Forget it. There's no point in talking about this matter for now. We've gone over it more than enough with nothing to show for our efforts. Changyang Ba sighed before turning to Jianchen. Xiangya, your father still has something that I hope you'll agree to. You and your third aunt, Ling Long, have harbored some ill will with one another, that I know. Your third aunt has a small level of tolerance for matters like these due to experiences she has had in the past. Her making life difficult for you was a result of these experiences, but even now, she and your third brother have felt remorse for their actions. They have not been eating with the rest of the family because of their guilt. So, your father wishes that you will understand and forgive your third aunt. Changyang Ba spoke. There was a slight pleading tone to his words. A sound that was exceedingly rare, especially to a child as the head of a family. Jianchen was more than willing to agree to his father's request. He did not feel completely disgusted by the actions of his third aunt. They were by rights family, and Jianchen was disinclined to ruin a perfectly warm and receiving household with an opinion he didn't hold. The fact that he was willing to let bygones be bygones pleased Jianchen's father to no end. Afterward, Jianchen took out a small portion of the 100-grass wine given to him by the Ape King. Pouring the cups evenly, he distributed them all to the people around the table. As soon as each person took a sip, they could feel their inner strength explode with newfound power. Just 3 months ago, Changyangba had managed to become a second cycle Earth Saint Master. He now stepped into the third cycle with the assistance of the wine. Baiyu Shuang and Ling Long both felt themselves jumping to the advanced Saint Master level, and even Bai Yuntian, who had never materialized her Saint weapon, felt the benefits come flowing in her. She had been a third-class Radiant Saint Master before, but a single sip was more than enough to eclipse all of her hard work before to propel her into the fourth class. Chang Wuji had been invited to take a sip as well. For a Heaven Saint Master like him, a sip of the 100-grass wine was only enough to increase his inner saint force by a small increment. The small increase had not been enough to reach a breakthrough like Kafir, the headmaster of Kargath Academy, had. With the wine drunk and the food eaten, Jianchen followed his parents back to visit his eldest brother, Changyang-hu. Changyang-hu was confined to the bed without even the most basic of motor abilities since he had lost his limbs. He couldn't eat or change his clothes without help. A life that was robbed of any freedom of movement was a life that words could hardly begin to describe the cruelty of. The sight of his own older brother in such a wretched state caused Jianchen's heart to ache. He wanted nothing more than to find a way to become a 7th-class Radiant Saint Master, so he could find some sort method to restore the amputated limbs of Changyang-hu. On the morning of the second day, Jianchen visited Lore City to find Sans and Kendall's wife. The mother and son had been able to open a rather big inn on one of the more flourishing streets because of the staunch support of the Changyang clan. Business was booming and the patrons flowed in and out like an endless stream of water. With the name of the Changyang clan waved over them, their inn had soon enough become one of the safest inns in the city. No incidents ever took place within their building, meaning that mercenaries and merchants alike could gather here in peace. Farewells were given to the two before Jianchen flew out of Lore City. He was back in the air headed toward the desolate lands where the flame mercenaries were. Once there, Jianchen called for an impromptu meeting with the men. "Jianchen, what is the matter for you to rush us like this?" As soon as they were gathered within the tent, Ming Dong immediately found his voice to speak up. Seated at his own chair up front, Jianchen looked at the group with people with a grim expression. "Pass on my orders. We will pack up camp and head straight for the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom without rest." The entire group was stunned by this order, and it was Yu who asked a question first. "Even through the night?" "Jianchen, what is the matter?" "Yes, even through the night." Jianchen nodded his head. "Go and spread the news to everyone. I will be leaving first." "Jianchen, why has the situation become all frantic-like? Has some sort of accident come up or something?" Ming Dong cried out. "Allow me to keep this a secret for now. I'll tell you about it when we arrive at our destination. Disperse and make the preparations. I'll be leaving first." As soon as he finished speaking, Jianchen exited the tent and flew off toward the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom with haste. 2 days later, Jianchen arrived within the territory of the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. Hurrying to recall a mental map of the 7 partitioned territories, Jianchen then flew off to the Blood Moon Mercenaries' land. As the dominating power in one of the 7 areas, the location of the Blood Moon Mercenaries was found relatively quickly once Jianchen asked around. Jianchen had made the rest of the trip in no time at all. The headquarters of the Blood Moon Mercenaries was situated within a revised castle. It did not hide the flying figure of Jianchen from anyone's sight. With the fact that Jianchen had not bothered to make his traveling discreet, the captain of the Blood Moon Mercenaries was quickly notified of his arrival. He swiftly moved to welcome him. 1,000 welcomes for the Imperial Protector. What is the current situation? Has news of the tungsten alloy remained a secret? Jianchen whispered. "Here is my report. Everything has been taken care of, and the secret has remained a secret. Aside from a few reliable brothers in arms, not a single outsider knows of it. Even the men of the other 6 factions remain unaware of this secret. Tynes spoke. Nodding his head in satisfaction, Jianchen replied, "Good, you've done well. For your services today, I will reward you nicely in time. For the honor of the Qinhuang Kingdom and the Imperial Protector, it is the honor of mine to serve." Tynes solemnly replied. Jianchen laughed. "Well, where is the location of the mine? Take me there." "Yes." It had been to his even bigger shock that there was even more tungsten alloy than what was initially measured. The extent in which the vein extended to was more than enough to leave any man utterly inconsolable even. Now knowing the situation behind the hidden cave side, Jianchen could finally let out a breath in relief. Before, his heart had been pacing wildly from what he was witnessing, but now, he was already back to his original state of mind. And now that his emotions had been completely quelled, Jianchen began to extend outwards with his presence once more. Deeper and deeper, his presence had started to investigate just how deep this hidden vein of tungsten alloy had gone. With the vast speed of his presence extending into the ground, Jianchen had soon enough reached roughly 10 kilometers deep into the ground. Thanks to his skill with spreading his presence, Jianchen could conclude that this had been a very pure vein all in all. The deeper he looked, the purer the vein was. And now that he was 10 kilometers deep, Jianchen could see that the purity of this vein was at least 90% or perhaps even close to 100. In other words, this was no longer a mine of tungsten alloy but a subterranean area completely made of tungsten alloy. Faced with such a discovery, Jianchen had been hard-pressed to quell his emotions this time. It had been with such excitement that his entire body began to shake, but he did not stop his investigation and continued onwards. 11 kilometers. 12 kilometers. 13 kilometers. 14 kilometers. Soon enough, Jianchen had reached his limits to what he could extend to with his presence at 15 kilometers. But at that point, Jianchen's expression had took on a startled change. Just slightly beneath the 15th kilometer point, Jianchen could just barely detect an abnormally strong surge of energy with his presence. It was almost as if there had been a barrier preventing him from detecting anything else underneath the protective layering. Even the immensity of the barrier itself was an unknown variable to him. "What is that?" Jianchen murmured to himself. This sudden oddity had been far outside Jianchen's expectations. It had been unfortunate that his presence was not enough to go beyond this 15-kilometer stop point, as he had no other way to investigate what this strange energy was. The next step had been to investigate the surrounding area with his presence before finally withdrawing it. It had been with furrowed eyebrows that he stared down below at the ground as he tried to think. This occurrence had brought a great deal of curiosity onto him and completely overshadowed the joy he felt from the discovery of far down the tungsten alloy went. If only my presence was strong enough. As things stand now, it's futile to try and see what lies beyond that barrier, but I can at the very least explore it in the future. Jianchen thought to himself. Right by Jianchen's side, Tynes had noticed the puzzled look on Jianchen's face and asked out in concern, "Imperial Protector, what is the matter?" "Tynes, what is the history behind this valley? Is there perhaps any legends about this place?" Jianchen asked. "I have heard no such thing before." Tynes shook his head after racking his mind for any pertinent information. Letting out a sigh in defeat, Jianchen looked around the entire valley with his presence. For about 20 meters beyond this area, the tungsten alloy had already deteriorated into a purity rate of 50%. And by 50 meters, the amount of tungsten alloy was practically nil, with just stone and dirt left in its place. With the entire valley investigated, Jianchen could finally ascertain that the heart of the tungsten alloy was located within a diameter of 100 meters of this place. The tungsten alloy at the very heart of the valley was the purest at about 85% purity. Now that his investigations was completely over, Jianchen and Tynes returned back to the headquarters of the Blood Moon mercenaries. At the very top of the castle in which the Blood Moon mercenaries were located at, Jianchen could be seen conversing with Tynes and the other high-ranking members of the Blood Moon mercenaries. "Excavate the tungsten alloy as soon as you can while ensuring that no one learns of its existence. There should be no reason that anyone should learn about it. Tynes, I'll leave it up to you to deal with this. Jian Chen commanded. But, Imperial Protector, the purity of these ores is already an issue to be considered. Combined with the magical properties of the tungsten alloy that makes it 100 times stronger than reinforced steel, a year wouldn't be enough time to make even a single dent in the amount of ores. A black-robed elder spoke. This elder in particular was an Earth Saint Master and a senior figure of the mercenaries. Imperial Protector, I've already notified the head of the other 6 heads. Should we tell them the news as well? Perhaps have them choose a single reliable person to go extract the ore? Tynes offered. Yes, I can agree to that notion. Wait until those 6 arrive and then tell them the news. Jian Chen spoke. Half a month later, the rest of the 6 heads had finally assembled at the headquarters of the Blood Moon mercenaries. With all 7 gathered, Jian Chen could re-engage in another series of secret discussions and allowed for everyone to be delegated on their tasks to extract the ore. This meeting had taken a significantly longer amount of time as Jian Chen had to discuss several aspects of confidentiality with the 7 Heaven Saint Masters. Preliminary matters such as who would extract the ore, who would transport it, and who would refine it in secret. On the second day, Tynes had immediately led 500 of his most trustworthy men to go extracting the ore on pretense of hunting for magical beasts. Chapter 596. Return to Mercenary City. 2. Jian Chen's eyes had lit up when he heard Huang Luan's suggestion. He did not know just how strong the Saint Ruler was, but if he was able to go toe-to-toe with 2 other Saint Rulers, then he would definitely belong to the higher echelons of the chart. In the case that a Saint Ruler did help him, then very few people would dare work against him. Wait until for the situation to arise first before we call on your ancestor to help us. Jian Chen smiled. Aside from the 4 imperial protectors from the Qin Huang kingdom, he had also the ancestor of the Huang family to help him. With those 5, Jian Chen had no desire to use them at the wrong moment. As for Ming Dong's uncle figure, Jian Chen had no delusions that he would be able to ask for his assistance. The Saint Ruler was very unwilling to complicate himself with any external affairs, and even the priceless tungsten alloy would not be enough to shake his neutrality. But there had been no leaks of the information at all in regards to the tungsten alloy. Aside from Jian Chen's group, only the 7 leaders and their men had known about it. The excavators had all their storage items confiscated during their time in the mines in order to prevent news or evidence from being spread. Even their movements had been limited to only 10 meters beyond the mines. The Flame Mercenaries had been stationed within the castle of the Blood Moon Mercenaries whilst all of this was going on. When the 7 leaders heard that it was Jian Chen himself who led the group, they had immediately announced their own desires to join the Flame Mercenaries. And now with the inclusion of those 7, the Flame Mercenaries had exploded once more in strength. The entirety of the land that had been the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom was fully engulfed by Jian Chen, and the amount of experts within the land had been plentiful. Aside from Jian Chen, there were nearly a dozen other Heaven Saint Masters included amongst the mercenaries, making the Flame Mercenaries a household name within the surrounding 100,000 kilometers. The following days had been calm in comparison to the news from above, with the tungsten alloy being extracted methodically. Every day, an abundant amount of the ore would be collected, and the key figures in the operation such as Jian Chen had been all the happier to see it. When all of the tungsten alloy is extracted, we definitely have enough to use them for our city. Ming Dong spoke with a quavering voice. If this tungsten alloy were to be used to build the city, then the defensive strength it would boast would be enough to be one of the strongest cities on the continent. Even the 7 capital cities would be equal to us. Even the normally quiet-spoken Dugu Feng had been filled with an expectant look in his eyes. For his own younger cousin, Jian Chen was a very doting figure. Whirling her head to look at the little tiger on Jian Chen's shoulder, she spoke with a mischievous smile. Could you leave behind Xiao Bai? I want to play with it. The tiger was a very intelligent creature and had understood exactly what Bai Lian was asking for. As quick as lightning, it had jumped over from Jian Chen's left shoulder to right shoulder to avoid Bai Lian and hugged at Jian Chen's neck tightly with its paws and eyes that stared vigilantly at Bai Lian. As if annoyed by what the tiger cub had done, Bai Lian stared at it with her arms at her waist. Xiao Bai, Am I really that scary? I fed you some roasted meat the past few days, and this is how you repay me? You won't even let me hug you. Mroroer. Xiao Bai had let loose a mournful sound that not everyone had understood. But its paws had only gripped around Jian Chen's neck, even tiger, meaning that it was very reluctant to split with Jian Chen. Forget it, Bai Lian. Xiao Bai may as well be Jian Chen's shadow. You'd have a better chance climbing the ladder into the heavens than to separate Xiao Bai from Jian Chen. You giggled. Bai Lian, this is a request that I can't help you with. I am not one to force Xiao Bai to do what it doesn't want. Jian Chen smiled apologetically. Forget it then. Bai Lian glared balefully at Xiao Bai in disappointment. With Xiao Bai on his shoulders still, Jian Chen bade farewell to the rest of the group and left. He had originally wanted to leave Xiao Bai here instead of carrying it over with him, since he would have to pass Mercenary City to reach Longevity Valley. It was a trip that did not guarantee security, but the tiger cub had been completely deaf to any words Jian Chen had said to it. Unable to convince the tiger cub, he could only allow for the cub to go with him. It had been extraordinarily good weather today. The sun was shining bright and not a single cloud could be seen, leaving the sky a boundless canvas of azure. Flying 1,000 meters high into the sky, Jian Chen headed straight for the Dazhou Kingdom so that he could use their space gate to reach Mercenary City. Because of the growth that the tiger cub went through, its sense of smell had improved by several degrees as well. Every so often when Jian Chen flew over a forest, it would just barely be able to sniff out the heavenly resources hidden throughout the verdant plants. Some had been over 1,000 years old in age and shocked even Jian Chen. It had been, as Rum Guinness had said, the tiger cub would gain the ability to search and find heavenly resources with its own strength. It took several days for Jian Chen to arrive at the frontier of the Dazhou Kingdom, but as soon as he hit that line, Jian Chen came to a stop mid-flight. Thinking for a bit longer, he immediately flew off in a different direction than before. Just several hours after he had changed directions, Jian Chen had left the Dazhou Kingdom and arrived at the bordering kingdom of the Zhuya Kingdom. Heading within its borders, Jian Chen flew straight for the first-class city, Walorant City. Within the area of the city, Jian Chen touched down onto a relatively empty location and followed his memories through the city before finally coming to a stop right outside a large mansion. The mansion that Jian Chen had stopped in front of had a giant signboard right above it saying, Tianqin Clan. These two words had a seemingly magical feeling to them and brought forth a deluge of memories from several years ago. Unable to stop himself, Jian Chen began to replay the memories of when he and Ming Dong first came to the city. In Walorant City, it had been Qin Shao that had left the biggest impression on Jian Chen. Hey you there. What are you doing spacing out in front of the gates of the Tianqin clan? Get lost, this isn't a place you can block the road. In the middle of Jian Chen's thoughts, one of the guards had let out a shout and disrupted him. Waking back up to reality, Jian Chen looked at the burly figure next to him and cupped his hands in a polite greeting. Would you perhaps know if the young master, Qin Shao, is inside? Stopping in his stride to size Jian Chen up, the guard had taken notice that the robes Jian Chen wore was quite expensive, and the air to him had been unordinary. Immediately growing wary, the guard asked, Who are you? The young master Qin Shao is not someone that anyone could see on a whim. This one is Jian Chen, a friend of the young master Qin Shao. Jian Chen cupped his hands. Despite this person being only a guard, he had been calm and polite to him. What? You're Jian Chen? The guard had immediately been surprised to hear that name. Straight away, the expression on his face had changed to have a smile on it. Ah, so it is indeed Lord Jian Chen. This lowly guard must be blind if I could not recognize Lord Jian Chen. Please forgive me, Lord Jian Chen. The young master Qin Shao had said before that should Lord Jian Chen arrive, we are to bring him straight in. The guard welcomed Jian Chen within the compound politely while then notifying another guard to report to Qin Shao. Chapter 597, Return to Mercenary City, 3. Received once more into the Tianqin clan, Jian Chen had been once more honored into the compound just like with his last arrival here. Even the head and the senior figures of the clan had made their way over to the halls to greet Jian Chen. Jian Chen was after all, the king of mercenaries, and a figure that the Tianqin clan would not dare bear arrogance with. Even as he was being warmly received, Jianchen had finally met up with Qin Shao once more. Years may have gone past, but there had been no significant changes in Qin Shao, whether it was in personality or body. There had been a tremendous increase in his strength, however, as he was now an Earth Saint Master. The moment when Qin Shao saw Jianchen, he had been ecstatic and wrapped him into a hug. "Hey, Jianchen. I've been waiting for you return. Any later, and I would have gone looking for you instead." Untying himself from the embrace, Jianchen gave a cursory appraisal of Qin Shao before approving of the change. "Not bad, you've become an Earth Saint Master. What a talent you have. If I'm not wrong, you've only just hit the age of 30. A 30-year-old becoming an Earth Saint Master, that's an achievement that the entire Tianyuan continent would regard as true talent." Replying for his son, the head of the Tianqin clan laughed with pride. "Qiner is talented indeed. Even in our Jia kingdom, there is not a single person that holds as much potential as he does. Just half a year ago, the king himself had betrothed his daughter to Qina. Many of the other factions of the kingdom have already tried their hand at arranging a marriage as well." Nodding at the man, Jianchen looked to Qin Shao. "Qin Shao, is that true? You're wedded now?" There had been an embarrassed look on Qin Zhao's face when faced with the question. Laughing, he said, "The wedding day has already been established. In 2 years' worth of time, I will be wed to the third princess of the Jia kingdom. Jianchen, you and Ming Dong have to make sure that you will attend my wedding." Of course we will." Jianchen laughed with joy over Tianqin's excitement. Moving on, Jianchen and Qin Shao had walked deeper within the courtyards of the clan to talk as they pleased. Entirely out of the blue, Qin Shao blurted out a single question as soon as they were alone. "Jianchen, although I am not of the same level of strength as brother Ming Dong, I am still an Earth Saint Master and a man capable of my own decisions. I've stayed within the Tianqin clan long enough. Would it be possible for me to follow you in your travels through the continent?" "Really? Of course you can. As things turn out, I have founded a mercenary group that is short of people I can trust at the moment. If you're willing, why not join my mercenary group?" Jianchen laughed. "Brother, my apologies, I've kept you waiting. My lord Jianchen, I had no idea you would come in either." There had been a faint smile on Jianchen's own face when he nodded, but when he was about to speak, Qin Shao had cut in first. "Sister, you spend more than enough time wearing that veil outside. Why do you wear it in our own home as well?" "Wearing this veil has become something of a habit for me. To take it off now would be a strange change," she replied softly. Turning to Jianchen, she spoke. "If I remember correctly, the last time we met, Lord Jianchen, it was a year ago. Have you been well since our last meeting?" A bright smile appeared on his face. "Worry not, this one has done well. On the other hand, you seem to have made great progress in the art of the zither I see. This girl has been studying the art of the zither for as long as she's lived. Every day I try my best to study and dedicate myself to the art. Even now, my skills are still lacking in comparison to someone like the famous heavenly enchantress." Jianchen's heart had skipped a beat when he heard mention of that name. "Perhaps you wish to follow the heavenly enchantress' footsteps and wish to delve into the way of the zither rather than Saint Force?" "I bet so. My sister has always been a smart one with a power of comprehension stronger than others. Even her skill in cultivation is decent, but what made my father disappointed was her lack of motivation to continue with her cultivation. As a result, she is only at the 5th layer of Saint Force and spends her time focusing on the zither instead. Although the ballads she plays are captivating, it's rather useless against an enemy." Qin Shao shrugged his shoulders noncommittally. The fact that his own sister was so entranced by the zither had been a source of a headache for him, since he did not see any applicable way it could be used for cultivation. Even though her brother had criticized the usefulness of the zither, she did not grow angry. Instead, she explained, "Brother, you underestimate the zither. I have not yet reached the beginning steps of the way of the zither, that's all. The profound mysteries of the music that a zither produces is something you couldn't possibly imagine. In the case that one truly embarks on this path of cultivation, then the fighting prowess they bring is far beyond what Saint Force could compare to. Aside from the heavenly enchantress, I have never heard of anyone else using the music of a zither as a way of cultivation. Sister, you don't have any guidance nor teachings on how to embark on this path. To try and find this path by yourself is difficult. Why not just cultivate with Saint Force instead? Qin Shao pleaded. But she had shaken her head in response. This is what I plan to do with my life. I will use all of my energy to accomplish my goal, and even if there lies nothing at the end of my path, I will not regret it. Qin Shao, if your sister is so set on this path, then let her walk the path she chooses. Although the music your sister plays is far below what is needed to fully captivate the soul of a person, it has reached a point of maturity in its own right. As long as she continues to practice and study, your sister will grow and learn. She will definitely reach the way of the zither she talks of. Qin Shao could only sigh in response to Jian Chen's words. In his mind, he really couldn't approve of the arduous path his sister set for herself. Thank your Lord Jian Chen for your encouragement. My name is Qin Qin. Please feel free to call me so in the future rather than sister of Qin Shao, my lord. She smiled. But behind the veil, the smile had been hard to distinguish. Qin Qin. Jian Chen spoke to herself. So your name was that? It is a delightful sounding name that suits a lady like yourself. The lively light in Qin Qin's eyes danced as she looked at Jian Chen and nodded. Without another word, her eyes went back to the old-looking zither on the table and her fingers moved to caress the strings of it once more to induce a melodious sound. Looking at the zither, Jian Chen hesitated for a moment. Miss Qin Qin, this one has once had the pleasure of meeting the heavenly enchantress in Mercenary City before. In the future, should I meet her again, this one will ask to see if she will impart any guidance onto you. Qin Qin's eyes had lit up at the sound of that. Then I will be in your care, my lord, to ask for the heavenly enchantress to be my master. That alone has been the greatest desire of mine since young. Jian Chen had not remained in the Tianqin clan long after that. Talking briefly with Qin Shao and Qin Qin for a moment longer, he finally left the clan after a small discussion with Qin Shao about the next thing he had to accomplish. Leaving behind Walorant City, Jian Chen flew back towards the Dazhou Kingdom once more. Afterwards, it had been an uneventful trip as Jian Chen finally crossed over into the Dazhou Kingdom and into the palace where he had the king welcome him in. There had been no obstructions for Jian Chen to use the space gate to travel hundreds of thousands of kilometers to reappear on the other side in the forests near Mercenary City. Confirming his own position on a map, Jian Chen rose into the air and shot off away into the skies towards the city. He had planned on entering Mercenary City to not only buy several things for Elder Xiu, but he had also hoped that there would be anything else worthy of his notice in the city. Chapter 598, Return to Mercenary City, 4. Mercenary City was situated at the very center of the entire continent as if to serve as the heart of the land. Although there were no walls, the territory that the city spanned over was no less than the 7 capital cities. In name, it was the most well-known city in the continent. And in the heart of every single mercenary, Mercenary City was the very symbol of divinity. As the holy grounds for every mercenary, the name of the city itself represented freedom and peace. Within Mercenary City, a series of complicated regulations and laws were put into place to uphold the security and peace of the city. There was no division between the strong and the weak. Even if it was a heaven saint master, their status was no different than from the common villager. Everywhere else on the continent, the law of the jungle reigned supreme. But here, that law was non-existent. Fighting was prohibited within the area of the city, and the very moment any single person entered the city, even the strongest wouldn't be able to use their strength without fearing the consequences. This prohibition had thus led to many people referring to Mercenary City as the safest asylum to live in. As long as one lived here, there would be no need to worry about being chased down and killed by anyone. In the course of history, there had been plenty of people that disregarded this law and broke it. But each and every single one of these lawbreakers had been killed without mercy, even the Heaven Saint Masters. Coincidentally, there had never been a case of murder that happened within the city. The only thing that could serve to establish your status within the city was money. With money, one would be able to live a life that even a prince would envy. Without money, one would have to live on the streets. Even finding food would prove to be a challenge. With the tiger cub in hand, Jianchen flew across the skies at a steady pace. From afar, a series of large buildings could be seen stretching into the skies. From above, Jianchen could just barely see the transparent barrier that surrounded the entirety of the city. His eyes carefully studied the barrier with curiosity. He had only been to Mercenary City once before, but even that had only given him a small portion of information when it came to the city. He knew of several things such as the fact that it was forbidden to fight within the city, and that the barrier that spanned across the sky had to do with that prohibition. Because of the fact that Mercenary City had no walls, a series of roads and streets intersected one another throughout the entire area. With roads leading in and out of the place, mercenaries could travel through the city along with their carts in numerous amounts. Despite the fact that there were no guards stationed anywhere, none of these mercenaries had acted as unruly as they might be out in the wildlands of the continent. No matter where they were in the city, they acted nice and polite. Touching down onto the ground several kilometers away from the barrier, Jianchen walked the rest of the way. Without a care for the nearly transparent barrier, he walked through and into Mercenary City. As soon as he entered the city, Jianchen bought a Class 3 magical beast for him to ride throughout the city. Combined with the fact that Mercenary City was large and that Jianchen was prohibited from flying, Jianchen would have to ride a magical beast mount if he wished to get to his destination swiftly. Riding on top of the magical beast, Jianchen traveled slowly through the major streets of the city to buy all sorts of delicacies from the street stalls. These were all gifts for the natives of Longevity Valley. Little Fatty most especially. He had never once traveled outside the valley and knew nothing about the outside world. This by extension meant that he had never once experienced the delicacies of the continent. For half the day, Jianchen walked through the streets. Using the money saved in his space ring, Jianchen had gone on a wild shopping spree and had managed to fill up 5 whole space belts before he had been satisfied. Hopping onto his mount, Jianchen then rode straight for the drugstores. About an hour later, Jianchen arrived at a 5-layered pavilion. This was where all sorts of priceless heavenly resources could be bought and sold from within the city. Roar. As soon as Jianchen and the tiger cub arrived in front of the pavilion, the tiger cub had caught a whiff of the fragrant aroma from the heavenly resources. Calling out with excitement from its spot in Jianchen's robe with such force, if not for the tight grip Jianchen had on it, the cub would have dashed into the pavilion. He had tried his best to hide the faint smile on his face when he saw the impatience of the cub. Heavenly resources all over the age of 1,000 were very rare in the Jessen Kingdom, and so it had gone for a very long time without tasting such a delicacy like that. With the cub in hand, Jianchen strode into the pavilion. There were plenty of other customers shopping around the place, ranging from mercenary to merchant to attendants dashing around the place to help service everyone. From their mouths, talks of discussion about what item to buy could be heard. Several of the mercenaries could be seen buying even the several hundred-year-old ones. Looking around the place, Jianchen could see that the first story of the pavilion sold several priceless drugs, but not a single heavenly resource could be seen. This way of merchandise selling was not unfamiliar to Jianchen. He knew that the more expensive wares would be on the higher levels of the pavilion. So without further ado, Jianchen walked up to the second story. On this level, the more expensive types of drugs could be seen along with several heavenly resources. The ages of these ones were below the age of 500, but even here on this second floor had plenty of customers. Again, without looking around, Jianchen headed for the third floor. But when he reached the stairwell entrance, a guard moved to stop him. "My apologies, sire, but the third floor onwards is restricted to customers with a purple card." This guard spoke apologetically. Without a word, Jianchen flashed several purple cards for the man to see. At the sight of them, the guard had relinquished the path to allow for Jianchen to continue on his way with a smile. Compared to the second floor, the third floor was quite peaceful. Only a few scant people could be seen haggling prices with the attendants here. And on this floor, Jianchen could finally see some of the more sealed heavenly resources displayed here and there. Right below the caseboard, their prices were clearly written with a bottom line price of 10,000 purple coins. Some of the more ancient wares had surpassed even 15,000 purple coins that had been an exorbitant price. The 1,000-year-old heavenly resources had caused the tiger cub to open its eyes wide and start to lick its lips in anticipation. "My lord, how may I serve you today?" A 20-something-year-old woman attendant suddenly came into view. Slowly walking up to one of the more well-preserved heavenly resources, Jianchen spoke. "I wish to speak some business with you. Have your shopkeeper come out to talk." She had looked at Jianchen oddly, but without any further complaint, she went off to look for the shopkeeper. Soon enough, a middle-aged woman with grandiose-looking robes came following the previous attendant in. Coming to a stop right in front of Jianchen, the attendant smiled and introduced Jianchen to the man. "My lord, this figure here is the shopkeeper." Looking Jianchen up and down, the woman gave a small smile on her face. "My name is Okair, shopkeeper of this pavilion. Might I ask to know your name, my lord? You give me a familiar feeling, as if I have seen your visage somewhere before." Smiling in return, Jianchen spoke. "Shopkeeper Okair, let us talk business. Does your store happen to have any heavenly resources over the age of 1,000? Seeing that Jianchen was unwilling to disclose his identity, Okair had decided not to push it any further and smiled. "Certainly, we have several of those heavenly resources in stock, but not by much. In total, there are 28 of them over the age of 1,000. My lord, if you are asking such a question, do you perhaps mean to purchase them?" "Shopkeeper Okair, please calculate the total price of the 28 then," Jianchen replied. The woman had been taken aback. Uncertain of how to phrase the question, she asked anyways, "My lord, do you mean to say that you wish to purchase all 28 of them? That will certainly not be a small sum of money." Jianchen nodded his head and spoke no more of the issue. With that confirmation, a smile had lit up on Okair's face. A customer purchasing over 20,000-year-old heavenly resources was an extremely rare sight to be seen. Hurriedly taking out an abacus, Okair started to total up the sum of all the items. "My lord," she began, "each of the 28 heavenly resources have varying ages. Some are just 1,000 years old, some are 2,000 or 3,000 years old. Combined with the fact that some of them are of rare species, each one of the heavenly resources will be of different prices. As such, the cumulative price will be 1,030,000 purple coins. If my lord is willing to purchase them in bulk, then we will discount the remaining 30,000 purple coins for a grand total of 1,000,000 purple coins. Is that to your satisfaction?" "Correct. Then the 28 heavenly resources will be bought for 1,000,000 purple coins." Jianchen handed a purple card over to Okair. He knew somewhat of the pricing of heavenly resources, and so even though the ages of the heavenly resources were all different, Jianchen knew that the price given to him had been a very fair one. In the smaller cities, heavenly resources such as these would be priced for far higher. Taking the purple card into her trembling hands, Okair spoke, "Should my lord ever come to my pavilion for any future 1,000-year-old heavenly resources, this servant here will be sure to give a favorable price." With a small hum to himself, Jianchen spoke, "Shopkeeper Okair, would you perhaps have any heavenly resources over the age of 10,000? "What? Heavenly resources above the age of 10,000? Okair had been astounded. Regarding Jianchen with a stupefied look, she answered, "My lord, how could heavenly resources of that age possibly be that easy to find? 10,000-year-old heavenly resources are something that the entire Tianyuan continent can only stumble upon once in a while. Not only are they impossible to find in markets, each time one appeared, they are worth countless of purple coins. They are something that could allow people to become anew and are known to many as ingredients to immortality. Many of the experts standing at the zenith of the continent would use such things to extend their lifespans even. Perhaps shopkeeper Okair knows of a place where such heavenly resources could be purchased at?" Jianchen pressed on. Pausing to think for a moment, Okair then finally responded, "According to what I know, 10,000-year-old heavenly resources are all rare. With each appearance of one, they have shown up in only the capital cities and mercenary city. To my knowledge, they have appeared once every 3 years or so amongst the 7 capital cities, and once a year here. A tremendous auction house always follows 2 days after its announcement, So if my lord is still in need of one, then your best luck would be at the auction house. Chapter 599, Spirit of the Barrier, 1. Shopkeeper Okire, thank you for your information. Jianchen cupped his hands in gratitude. But where might this yearly auction house take place? There are plenty of auction houses in this city after all. Perhaps you are not as familiar to Mercenary City as I thought if you know not even this, my lord. Okire spoke in between a small burst of laughter. Then, please allow this servant to explain. There are indeed plenty of auction houses within Mercenary City, but those are all privately owned auction houses. There is only a single auction house that is regulated by the entire Mercenary City. As long as my lord makes the proper inquiries, you will learn of the place almost instantly. It is how this auction house is run and what it sells that marks it different from the others. With Mercenary City itself running the auction every year, many extremely rare objects can be seen from it, ergo the 10,000-year-old heavenly resource. They have always been sold off by this auction house. Relevantly, the 10,000-year-old heavenly resource that my lord wishes for will always appear here. But each time they appear, it has always been a fight of money to purchase it. If my lord is adamant on purchasing it, then you must prepare yourself to use a large sum of purple coins to purchase it. Indeed, thank you for your warning. Jianchen replied gratefully. The shopkeeper smiled. My lord, you are far too polite. This is nothing that could warrant your thanks. The future patronage of my lord would be more than enough to keep this servant happy. She spoke before handing the purple coins back to Jianchen after processing it. Taking out an exquisite space belt, she handed it over to Jianchen. My lord, here is your purple card and the heavenly resources are within this belt. Please hold it well. Obediently taking the purple card back into his own space ring, Jianchen took the space belt and inspected the inner contents to ensure everything was there. Smiling, he stored it away into his space ring and left the pavilion after bidding farewell to Okire. Freely walking up to the windowsill, Okire watched as Jianchen walked further and further away into the streets. With furrowed eyebrows, she began to mutter to herself, "Just who is that person? It is strange to think that he is familiar to me, as if I've seen him somewhere before. But I have never left Mercenary City as of late, and the amount of acquaintances I have is very few. Where could I have possibly met a youngster like this before?" Taking the Class 3 magical beast mount for a ride, Jianchen held a radish-shaped heavenly resource for the tiger cub to munch on. With bright and spirited eyes, the cub devoured the entire thing happily. Heavenly resources for the tiger cub were an extremely rare and delicious delicacy. This stardust might have been in the auction house, but the actual house had not yet started any of their auctions and was thus unavailable to the audience. It would be at least another 2 days before it would start. Perhaps the stardust would appear then. Afterwards, Jianchen had spent the rest of his time walking the streets. Going from one drugstore to another, he purchased another 50 or so thousand-year-old heavenly resources and spent well over 2 million purple coins. The stab in his wallet had not been a stab to his heart, however. The growth of the tiger was far more important than money, and since the tiger required an exponentially large amount of time to grow, heavenly resources were the only way to expedite this procedure. Jianchen wasn't short on money either, since he took the purple coins from the space rings of the Heaven Saint Masters he killed along with any other valuable item. There was still the money from the treasuries of both the Pingyang Kingdom and the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom that he had not yet exhausted, along with the monster cores. These alone were enough to make Jianchen into a mobile treasury with the raw amount of value he had on him. It was only until dusk that Jianchen finally stopped his window shopping spree through the streets and settled in one of the inns to wait for the auction 2 days from now. There would undoubtedly be heavenly resources over the age of several thousand years old at this auction house, as well as the stardust needed to forge the azulite swords. This meant that the upcoming auction event would definitely be an event that Jianchen couldn't afford to miss. In the same vein, this meant that Jianchen would have to delay his trip to Longevity Valley for another 2 days. Later that evening, in his own grand room, Jianchen sat on top of his bed in the midst of concentration. He had wanted to try his best to come to understand the energy of the world, along with the piece of a saint tier battle skill to become a saint ruler as soon as possible. By his side, The tiger cub wolfed down 3 heavenly resources and quickly fell into a deep slumber to process it into energy. The candle wick within the room had long since gone out, leaving the entire room in pitch-black darkness. Even if one's hand were in front of one's face, the fingers would not be visible at all. But in this darkness, the room was exceptionally quiet so that even a needle could be heard if it were dropped onto the ground. In the skies above Mercenary City, the gigantic barrier that had spanned across the entire city pulsated once. Shortly afterwards, a single girl's voice could just barely be heard from the skies. This is Master's scent. But didn't Master leave this world already? Why do I smell his scent then? Did Master return then? This clear voice had been clear in the dark skies over the city, but even with the peacefully quiet city, the sound did not travel far. Yes, this is Master's scent. But it's faint. Very faint. Did Master really return? The clear voice reverberated through the skies. From the voice, however, the tint of excitement could be heard. Soon enough, the wave of excitement sped into the city and caused everyone to feel slightly odd, but no one could pinpoint the reason why. "I've found it. It's here. Master's scent is definitely coming from here. Master has to have returned. This must be his way of testing me. How good my nose is. No matter how faint Master's scent is, I will definitely always be able to find it." The voice spoke, this time closer to the city. It had already traveled to the inn Jianchen was in and phased into the building. From within his room, Jianchen's ear twitched slightly and caused his eyes to open suddenly. At the same time, 2 bolts of light flew out from his eyes and illuminated the candlewick in the room to light up the room. Jianchen's eyes swept across the room vigilantly. The darkness was not a problem to him since he could see everything clearly. "Who's speaking?" Jianchen asked seriously. He had heard that clear voice earlier, but his presence had told him no one was around at all, causing him to be extra vigilant. Even if Mercenary City was extremely safe, he could not afford to drop his guard. "It's faint. Very faint. Master's scent is here." This time, the strange voice could be heard originating from the same room Jianchen was in. It had been extremely clear to hear, but no matter how much Jianchen looked around, he could not see just what human or ghost was speaking. Chapter 600, Spirit of the Barrier, 2. Bolting straight up from his bed, Jianchen landed gracefully onto the ground with his eyes staring hard at the entirety of the room. With his presence completely spread out so that the entire inn was covered in it, he began to test to see just who was there. But what had disappointed him was the fact that not a single being came into his detection. He had clearly heard the distinguishable voice of a person nearby him earlier. It was not of the same skill that a saint ruler would use to pitch their voice, since a saint ruler would use it to speak directly into the ear. This voice was different. It was a clear voice that anyone within earshot would be able to hear and detect the origin of. But even though it came from his side, the strange and bone-chilling thing was the fact that not a single living thing or spirit could be seen. "Who is speaking? Come out now," Jianchen commanded with a solemn face. This was a first that he had never seen before. As if responding to Jianchen's question, a previously dark spot near the corner of his room suddenly began to glow with light. Wisps of light began to gather in this one spot and slowly condense to show the silhouette of a person. As the light dissipated from the room, a single young woman who looked to be around 23 years old came into view. She had been quite cute and was slightly pink to the eyes. But the only defect in this otherwise beautiful figure was the fact that her body was eerily fake. It was not an actual human body and looked to be made from only light. Following her appearance, light filled the room and dispersed any remaining darkness from it. The iris in Jianchen's eyes dilated as he stared at the young woman as if he had seen a ghost. "Who are you?" Jianchen growled. Against this foreign threat with untold power, Jianchen was extremely vigilant. This girl could be an evil being after all. Curiously, the young woman stared at Jianchen before circling around him several times. Even while she walked around him, her eyes never left his body as she muttered, "It's faint. Master's scent is very faint. But you are clearly not my master. Hey, who are you then?" Her words had rendered Jianchen at a loss. Scratching his head in befuddlement, Jianchen had still remained calm throughout this. This one is Jianchen. Just who might you be? Why have you come to my room? Jianchen? Her eyebrows rose up as if she was thinking heavily. Who's Jianchen? Jianchen would be me. The muscle in Jianchen's face twitched. Looking at Jianchen, the young woman asked, You're Jianchen? No, you're not my master. My master's name isn't Jianchen. He isn't as weak as you are either. Weird, why do I smell master's scent then? Did I smell wrong? No way. There's no way I would mistake master's scent for someone else. No matter how faint, I will be able to find it. Her eyes then spun around the room several times along with her face as she laughed and giggled at Jianchen. Big brother, why don't you tell little spirit if you've seen my master before? Where is my master? Why has he not come back in forever? Does he not want little spirit anymore? Or even worse, did master forget about me? At the last few words, the young woman's eyes began to grow red as if she was ready to cry at any moment with sorrow. Seeing just how pathetic the young woman was getting, Jianchen felt an emotion tug away at him from within. It was almost as if he was looking at a small child sadly despairing over the separation from her parents. She was alone and helpless, a pitiful creature to the eyes. Little sister, why don't you tell me who you are? Who is your master? Perhaps I might have seen him before. Jianchen inquired. Right now in his mind, he was trying his best to think of any possible person that could fit the bill as fast as he could. I'm little spirit, but people call me the spirit of the barrier. As for my master, you should know him, he's the lord of this city. She answered. The lord of this city? Jianchen uttered a low grunt of stupefaction. It came to mind that the lord of this city was a divine figure, and when the thought came to mind, Jianchen's face immediately slackened. What did you say? Your master is the lord of Mercenary City? That's right. Mercenary City is ruled by my master. Big brother, so you do know my master. Tell me where my master is, okay? Big brother, I'm begging you. Her face had lit up when Jianchen had answered her. But then it quickly turned into a look of pleading and pity as she begun to beg him. A breath of surprise escaped from Jianchen's lips as he stared dumbfoundedly at this 20-something-year-old woman in front of him. The Lord of Mercenary City, that title had only one person in its history, and that person would be the strongest of the Tianyuan continent, Tianyun. This girl that was right in front of him, her master was actually the one hailed as the strongest of the continent Tianyun. That realization had been like a clap of thunder to his ears. A considerable amount of time had passed before Jianchen had finally regained his wits. Still staring rather shocked at the girl, he just had to ask once more, Little sister, did I hear you correctly? The Lord of Mercenary City, Tianyun, is your master? Even now, Jianchen was doubting what he had heard. Yes, of course. He is Little Spirit's master. Even for her entire life, Little Spirit has not forgotten about master. It was master that give Little Spirit her name, you know. But master left a long time ago and never saw me again. Little Spirit really misses master. As she got to the end of her words, the little girl's face grew crestfallen. For this one moment, she had looked truly alone. As if a bomb had gone off, Jianchen had not known what to think. He could only stare at this girl tongue-tied while trying to find his mind to respond. This eccentric young woman, was she really a person of the same lifetime of Tianyun? But with that thought, an extremely terrifying question had came to mind that Jianchen couldn't help but start to tremble and shake about. If this young woman was truly a person from the lifetime of Tianyun, then just how long had this person lived for? Big brother, please tell Little Spirit, okay? Where's my master now? Why hasn't he come back for Little Spirit? Little Spirit misses master. While Jianchen had been quiet, the young woman's eyes had already begun to grow teary and pitiful. Even Jianchen had felt a twinge of sympathy when he saw the pathetic expression of hers. The words she was asking for, however, would render anyone speechless, and Jianchen had no idea how to respond. Tianyun was a figure of antiquity. Even if he was the strongest on the continent, even he could not withstand the corrosion of time. Many generations had already passed since his pinnacle, and only the illustrious fame his name brought was left behind. Jianchen had never once seen Mo Tianyun before. Big brother, please tell little spirit, okay? Where is my master? The silence from Jianchen had prompted the young woman to plead again. Sighing to himself, Jianchen turned to look at the woman with a slight amount of fear. Little sister, I'm afraid to disappoint you, but I have never seen your master before. Impossible. You're lying to little spirit. Little spirit's nose is strong. Big brother, you can't lie to little spirit. Big brother, you have master scent, you've had to seen master before. She howled in disbelief. Giving a small shake of his head, Jianchen forced out a smile. Little sister, you must be mistaken. I've never seen your master before. Your master may have been the strongest this continent has ever seen before, but too much time has gone by. Your master has to have reached the end of his age span by now. You lie. Master was a magical figure who already broke free of most of the binds he had, even age itself. How could he reach the end of his lifespan then? Big brother, you can't lie to little spirit. The very notion of her master dying from age had made her angry beyond belief. Rubbing his temples with some pain, Jianchen was at a loss in how to deal with this noisy woman in front of him now. Big brother, please. You have to tell little spirit where master is, okay? Little spirit will definitely pay you back. This time, she spoke a second phrase to sweeten the deal. Little sister, it's not that I don't wish to tell you. It's that I've never seen your master before in truth. Jianchen spoke helplessly. As if worried now, the young woman began to howl and cry. But, you've clearly master's scent. Even if it's faint, little spirit can smell it. Brother, you have to have seen master before. Is there? Jianchen carefully looked at his own clothes in strange suspicion. This woman in front of him was adamant that he had the scent of Mo Tianyun, but he was absolutely convinced that he had never even seen him before. Then, a sudden thought came to Jianchen. Little sister, perhaps I have something that your master left behind. That may be why you sense your master's scent. Is that really it? Big brother, have you really not seen my master before? The young woman's face grew incredulous. I vow that I, Jianchen, have never seen your master before. Jianchen could no longer bear her questioning, and so in order to absolve him from any future questions, he had to pledge in such a manner. Dazed, the young woman stood transfixed to her spot to stare earnestly at Jianchen to try and confirm for herself. After a standoff for what had felt like an eternity, she finally let out a cry of sorrow. Master, where in the world have you gone? Do you no longer want little spirit anymore? Little spirit has missed you so much. Master, where are you? She cried out bitterly. As she cried, her body continued to convulse with shudders, and just slowly, Jianchen could see her body start to fade before finally disappearing and plunging the entire room back into darkness. Wah? Master, where did you go? You have to come back to find little spirit. Little spirit wants to see you so much. The darkness of the night had continued to convey the grieved crying sounds of the young woman for some distance before finally waning off into silence. Jianchen had felt influenced by her tears and grew uneasy as he tried to figure out the reason why she had appeared to him in the first place. Rekindling the light once more, Jianchen opened the window covers to look out into the sky. As of right now, it was roughly an hour past midnight, meaning that it was now one of the quietest moments in the city, and so the crying of the young woman would not be heard by many, if any. Shutting the windows once more, Jianchen sat back onto his bed to take out the space ring containing the 3 fist-sized patches of white animal skin to give it a good look. It would be only these 3 objects that Jianchen knew not the history of, and where they originated from. He had once thought that these 3 patches of animal skin would somehow lead to a hint of the saint ruler who oversaw the destruction of the Bai family in the past. Perhaps Mo Tianyun left these 3 patches before in the past. Jianchen thought. Chapter 601. 10,000-year-old heavenly resource. While Jianchen could surmise that these 3 pieces had the possibility of being left behind by Mo Tianyun, he really couldn't begin to fathom the mystery behind it. If this was some sort of treasure map, then there was no hint of a path or marking to indicate so on it. It looked to be a regular tuft of animal skin, but it was completely unbreakable and hard to the touch. Turning the 3 pieces around several times, Jianchen finally saw no more benefit to doing so any longer and stored them back into his space ring. One of the 3 was what remained from the destruction of the Bai family, and Jianchen had no intention on having that leak out. Afterwards, Jianchen stayed within his room for the next 2 days to when the annual auction would take place before finally leaving his room. But during these 2 days, the one called Little Spirit hadn't come to him again. Early that morning, Jianchen took hold of the tiger cub and made his way over to where the auction house was to be held. With the purchase of an entry ticket for several purple coins, Jianchen was able to enter the auction house with the throngs of other people. The space within the avenue was extremely spacious and had 7 levels to the main hall. Each level had a multitude of seats that spanned as far as the eye could see. There were at the very least 10,000 of them per level, and with there being 7 levels, that meant at least 70,000 people could be seated here. The auction houses of Mercenary City did not have special guest rooms for people to enjoy, had instead ordinary seatings for everyone. Whether it was the head of an illustrious family or the traveling merchant from some unknown land, they could be seen sitting together despite the gap in status. Still holding the sleeping cub, Jianchen walked up to a corner of one of the levels and carefully waited for the auction to finally start. Roughly 2 hours later, the entire hall had been filled up with people to max capacity. Despite it being filled with over 10,000 people, the entire place had been relatively silent, with everyone patiently waiting for the event to begin. Not a single person had tried to start a ruckus, and even those who were conversing to one another were doing so with whispers. If anything, many of them were using their eyes to do the talking. Just then, the last remaining strands of light within the room dimmed, plunging the entire area into darkness. For a while, this darkness persisted before several intense beams of light suddenly shot forth onto the frontmost podium for everyone to see clearly. Standing on top of this podium was a beautiful young woman who seemed to have appeared out of thin air. Her appearance had told her to be around 30 years old. The azure-blue robes she wore gave her a type of allure that perhaps only the devil itself could offer. In this one moment, a small wooden mallet could be seen on the podium with her. There had been no need for Jianchen to even think to know that this beautiful woman right there would be the host of the auction. But what had surprised Jianchen was the fact that this woman was an individual of the Heaven Saint Master level. Heaven Saint Masters were individuals that, if placed in the Jessen Kingdom, would enjoy an illustrious amount of fame. But for such an individual to be used to personally lead an auction house, this was a lavish opportunity that only Mercenary City would be able to afford. With a few words of greeting from the hostess, the auction house had thus officially started. One by one, rare oddities and exotic treasures began to make the stage and be offered to the audience. The entire audience, who had been silent before the auction had begun, had finally started to make noise as they shouted out their prices. Middle Earth tier battle skill for those with the Fire Saint Force. Lowest bid is at 50,000 purple coins. A single Class 7 Radiant Spirit pill that can heal even the most grave injuries of a person within minutes. Lowest bid begins at 70,000 purple coins. Class 6 Monster Core, a rare treasure that can rarely be obtained on the continent. A once-in-a-lifetime item. Lowest bid begins at 40,000 purple coins. One by one, the auctioneer would showcase rare items to the entire audience for them to bid and fight over. Each time the bid ended, the winning price was at least 3 times the original amount. Soon enough, 4 hours went by before the auctioneer brought out an antique yet elegant box. As soon as the lid was opened, a fragrant aroma wafted through the air and covered every inch of the entire room, causing several people to grow excited at the smell. From his own seat, Jianchen concentrated his eyes to stare at the box in the auctioneer's hand. He knew that this was something that he needed for himself. Dear audience, I presume that this is not a strange item to everyone here. The object I hold in my hand is an extremely rare heavenly resource. Its name is the Geo fruit, a fruit that was grown with spirit dirt that was enriched by the energy of the world. For 10,000s of years, the Geo fruit has existed in the world as an extreme rarity even amongst the other heavenly resources. Not only does it have a life-changing effect of power strengthening, it can also prolong the age span of the eater. Should an Earth Saint Master or Heaven Saint Master eat it, Their lifespan will definitely go up by another 200 years as well as elevate your power to a whole different realm. The appearance of the geofruit had inflamed the eyes of everyone there with excitement. Each of the Heaven Saint Masters were not lacking in funds by any means, and they had also several large groups to help supplement their wealth should they need it. For those almost at the end of their lifespan, worldly items such as money were nothing important at all. Their lives were far more important. The auctioneer smiled towards the audience to conclude her speech. Well, this servant will delay no longer with the auction. Everyone is well aware of the effects of the geofruit, I'm sure, and so it should go without saying that this is an opportunity that cannot be missed. With the starting price of 500,000 purple coins, with each successive bid defaulting to another 10,000. Begin. 550,000 purple coins. At the end of the auctioneer's declaration, a person had already increased the bid by 5 times the stated default. 600,000. A person to the side of Jian Chen had made a bid as well. He was a burly middle-aged man that wore a rich purple robe. His facial appearance was nothing special other than the 2 bright and spirited eyes of his and the tall sharp eyebrows over them. With those 2 traits and the powerful sword intent that exuded from him, he looked like a strong deity of the sword. Heaven Saint Master! When he had sensed the man's strength, Jian Chen had been secretly shocked. As expected, Mercenary City was a place where the strong gathered. It was rare to see Heaven Saint Masters elsewhere, but they were a common sight in the city. 700,000. 800,000. In the short moment after the geofruit was announced, a war between the bidders had already brought the price up to 1,000,000 purple coins. A price like this was already enough to buy several thousand-year heavenly resources already. 1,300,000. An elderly voice called out from the first level. By now, the astronomical price of the geofruit had already scared off many of the bidders so that only a few remained. 1,350,000. The man next to Jian Chen spoke with clenched teeth. It seemed as if this price was already nearing the limit of what he could afford. 1,400,000. The same elder from before immediately called out. With a disappointed sigh, the man muttered to himself, "Forget it, I'll wait for the next auction to buy one." Even though he had given up, there was still regret to be found in his voice. Jian Chen had clearly heard what the man had said and gave him a quick glance before looking back to the auction once more. 1,700,000. 1,800,000. By now, the price of the geofruit had already skyrocketed to almost 2,000,000 purple coins. While it looked like the only difference between a 1,000-year-old heavenly resource and a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource was age, a 100,000-year-old heavenly resource was able to prolong the life of the one who ate one. With just this one factor alone, a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource was far better than a 1,000-year-old one. Furthermore, 10,000-year-old heavenly resources were extremely hard to obtain. The ones that had managed to survive the harsh winds and stormy rain in nature weren't many, and many heavenly resources in the several thousand-year-old ranges were plucked by the magical beasts or humans already. Thus, raising heavenly resources to an ancient age like that was an extremely hard task. 2,800,000. At last did Jian Chen break his silence to offer a bid of his own that beat the previous bid by a whooping million. He knew that plenty of people were fighting desperately for the geofruit, so in order to deter the others from bidding, he would have to bid an even higher amount. This time, the auction house grew silent. 2,800,000? That was a sky-high price that would wash out the rest of the bidders. Even the middle-aged man right next to Jian Chen had stared strangely at him. Chuckling, he spoke, "Brother, you are quite bold if you're willing to spend so much money for the geofruit. I presume you'll be giving it to an elder of yours?" With a silent smile, Jian Chen shook his head. Laughing openly, the man replied, "I was mistaken, it seems. Then is it for your own use, brother? A 10,000-year-old heavenly resource gives a considerable amount of power to the eater. A great Saint Master can become an Earth Saint Master guaranteed with the help of one. One doesn't even have to worry about the risk of becoming a cripple during that threshold either." Jian Chen's eyes had lit up straight away when he heard those words from the man. Cupping his hands, he spoke, "Brother, is what you just said true? Can a great Saint Master really become an Earth Saint Master with this? Of course. This isn't a secret by any means. Brother, if you don't believe me, then feel free to ask any other man the same question. But because of the immense rarity of a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource, not a single household would be willing to waste such a treasure on a single great Saint Master. The man spoke. 3 million. Just then, another offer was given. 3,500,000. Jianchen did not hesitate to increase the price again. For the sake of his younger cousin, he would take this heavenly resource with all his power. Chapter 602, Fantasy Star Ocean. When the price had gone to 3,500,000 purple coins, even more bidders had gave up on bidding. Even the other bidders who were still bidding had begun to balk about the price and started to have second doubts. 10,000-year-old heavenly resources were rare, but they appeared once every year in Mercenary City. If they didn't get this one this year, there was always next time. 3,600,000. For a while, the auction house was silent before another voice finally called out. 4 million. Jianchen immediately gave an even higher bid. While it looked as if he was calm inside, his heart was starting to ache somewhat. 4 million purple coins was more than enough to buy 100,000-year-old heavenly resources. Brother, you must be very adamant on taking that geo fruit. Haha, I am Hu Shaotian. What might be your name, brother? The middle-aged man next to Jianchen asked. Jianchen turned to look at Hu Shaotian to study the man. Seeing how earnest and honest the man looked, Jianchen had decided the man to not be one to act kind in order to gain trust for their own benefit. This one is called Jianchen. He smiled. Jianchen? The very same one known as the number one in the gathering of the mercenaries and known as the king of mercenaries? That same Jianchen? Hu Shaotian exclaimed in surprise. I am he. Jianchen spoke. Hu Shaotian had been clearly startled by this announcement, but he had quickly regained his wits and cupped his hands in salute. So you were Jianchen, the king of mercenaries. It is nice to meet you. What pity it was that I was preoccupied when the gathering of mercenaries happened and was unable to watch the battles. Otherwise, I would definitely have watched your match. Afterwards, Jianchen and Hu Shaotian had spent the rest of the time chatting and bidding. And in the end, Jianchen had managed to bid a high price of 4,800,000 purple coins to win the geofruit. Whilst their conversation was going on, the eyes of the entire auction house had turned to look at the corner Jianchen was in. Each one of them were curious on just which grand family had a son like this. On the third floor of the auction house, a white-robed elder slowly creased his eyebrows as he went into deep thought. Strange, why does the voice of the one bidding for the geofruit sound so familiar? The elder muttered. Then, a second later, a brilliant gleam of light flashed across his previously dull eyes as he gave a small shout. Jianchen! That's Jianchen's voice. But how? Did he not survive? Now that he had surmised that the bidder had been Jianchen, the elder got out from his seat and hurried on over to the stairwell. Walking down to the first level, his eyes stared brightly through the dark auction house as he looked for the corner where Jianchen would be. Upon seeing Jianchen, the elder began to tremble as a vicious smile seized his face. It's him! It's really him! I didn't think that he had survived, but the seal of Treasure Mountain must still be on him. Feeling the sharp glare of the elder, Jianchen had instinctively turned to look at the source of the stare. When he saw the elder, Jianchen had been startled as well. But then a meaningful smile appeared on his face as he stood up from his chair as well and strode over to where the elder was. It was with a swagger to his step that Jianchen greeted the elder with a smile. If this one's memory is correct, then you must be the third elder of the Sher family. I didn't believe we'd meet each other here. How coincidental. This elder had been an elder of the Sher family with the wind affinity. Back when Jianchen had been chased to practically the ends of the earth, this feeling of hopelessness caused by the elder had given Jianchen an unforgettable memory of him. So you really are Jianchen? With that confirmation, the third elder was now completely convinced that this youth in front of him was the very same Jianchen that had the seal of Treasure Mountain on him. But then now that he knew Jianchen was alive, the man couldn't help but feel excited. Ever since Jian Chen's supposed death, they had never once stopped searching for the ruler armament. They had even spent countless of energy in order to use several secret methods to find the location of the ruler armament, but to no avail. And even worse, they had came out for the worse after it. But then out of nowhere, he came across the culprit who had stolen the ruler armament on a random trip to the annual auction house. This accidental meeting had given the elder a rekindled hope and glee. Jianchen, you are a resilient one. Even with such heavy injuries, you're still alive. The elder sneered. Laughing in return, Jianchen replied, perhaps King Yanluo himself was unwilling to give me shelter, so I escaped death. It was a mistake on our ends, I suppose, to not dispose of your body. If we had, you would not be able to live as happily as you do now. Jianchen, I don't wish to mince words with you. Since the Jetta clan isn't here, you may as well come back to my Shi family and return the seal of Treasure Mountain. We will keep silent about your survival if you come with us. The elder spoke. Still smiling, Jianchen stared playfully at the man. Third elder, you should go back. I have yet some things to buy, so I won't have time to accompany you. And with that, Jianchen turned around to return to his seat. Glaring daggers at the back of Jianchen, the third elder clenched his fist tightly in anger. If it were not the fact that they were in Mercenary City, he would have attacked Jianchen a long time ago without giving him the chance to escape. Jianchen, I'll see to it that you won't escape this time. The man laughed coldly to himself as he left the auction house. He was no longer in the mood to continue with the bidding. Brother Jianchen, I can see that old man was giving you a fishy stare. Was there a problem between the two of you in the past? As soon as Jianchen sat back down, Hu Xiaotian had spoken to him. Not caring to hide the truth, Jianchen nodded. Correct, he is an enemy of mine. Brother Jianchen, you should be careful then. That old man is a heaven saint master, that is an entity that an earth saint master can't hope to contend with. Hu Xiaotian spoke seriously. Thank you for your concerns, this one will be cautious then. Jianchen smiled. Because he had hidden his strength, Hu Xiaotian was unable to see just how strong he was. But brother Jianchen, you shouldn't worry too much. If you ever come across an enemy, then you only just need to run to Mercenary City. Not a single person would dare to act out in Mercenary City, even Heaven Saint Masters are no exception to this. It's hard to come across a Saint Ruler as an enemy as well, but even they won't cause strife in the city. Hu Xiaotian spoke. Jianchen's heart had skipped a beat when he heard that. Even Saint Rulers wouldn't dare fight? Is Mercenary City truly that terrifying? Far more than you could possibly believe. Hu Xiaotian's face had taken on a serious tone. Holding a hand out to point at the sky, he spoke, Little brother, you've seen the barrier of Mercenary City for yourself, I'm sure. Let me tell you, this barrier has existed for countless of years already from when Mo Tianyun himself placed the barrier down. Protecting Mercenary City through the ages in silence, it has struck down any single person that dared to fight or injure another within its boundaries. The more offensive offenders had been killed. That is how terrifying it is. I see, Jianchen remarked. And so the auction had gone on for another hour with plenty of strange but rare goods were bought. Some time after, the auctioneer had soon brought out a small glass bottle that was about the size of one's fist. Inside, there was a small and faint glow that seemed to resemble the dazzling light of a star. If one were to look carefully, then they would be able to see that within this bottle, there were a multitude of small particles of sand moving about just slightly. Each particle had let out a light that resembled starlight itself. And from afar, it looked as if the bottle contained the starry skies from up above, each light resembling an individual star from the universe. Holding the bottle up above her head for everyone to see, the auctioneer started, Audience, please allow me to introduce our next treasure to be sold. The item I hold in my hand will most likely be a first for everyone to see here. That is because this item is from one of the death zones of the Tian Yuan continent Fantasy Star Ocean. What? Fantasy Star Ocean? I've heard that aside from the Death's Nest, Fantasy Star Ocean is the most terrifying death zone. Even Cross Mountains isn't as terrifying compared to it. A Heaven Saint Master stands no chance there, and even a Saint Ruler would find their deaths at hand there. Who would have known that this would be an object from such a place? It has to be something that some saint ruler brought back with him. But what use is there for it? If it's from Fantasy Star Ocean, then there has to be some sort of use for it. Like the rock that would cause 1,000 ripples in a pond, the entire audience had begun to buzz with noise the moment they heard where the item came from. Each one of them were extremely interested in what the auctioneer was holding and begun to take curiosity in the bottle. Looking seriously at the bottle himself, Jianchen knew that this was the item that the two spirits had told him about. It was one of the extremely high-quality materials, stardust. This is stardust, but it's only a small amount. If we wish to forge the azulate swords, then we'd need at least several kilograms worth of stardust. Ziying spoke with disappointment within Jianchen's mind. But those words had done no small amount of shock to Jianchen, who remarked, "What? Forging the azulate swords would require that much stardust?" "Yes, the more stardust, the better until we hit the limit itself. The amount of stardust here might be small, but it is good to hear that this Fantasy Star Ocean has plenty more of it. Master, you must go to that place and gather even more of it." Ziying spoke. Jianchen couldn't help but feel a grimace overcome his face. He hadn't known how dangerous this Fantasy Star Ocean was before, but just hearing the others talk about it had given him a preliminary idea on the dangers. A Heaven Saint Master was destined to die if they entered, and even a saint ruler would most likely fall to their death. That much was enough to tell him that he wouldn't even be able to take a step there. Chapter 603, followed. The auctioneer's voice continued to speak. "The item I hold in my hand has a very unique name, spiritized dust. Not only is it pretty to look at, but the effects it has will undoubtedly be shocking to anyone that hears it. It contains the energy of the world within the particles of dust, and when worn on the body, then one's cultivation speed will skyrocket. It is by no means inferior to when one uses a monster core to cultivate." There had been a tremendous commotion from the entire audience from such a proclamation. From this, everyone knew just how much the dust was worth. But then the next few words that came out from the auctioneer's mouth had caused everyone to go practically insane. The effects of the spiritized dust isn't limited to just that. As soon as this dust makes contact with the outside world, it will draw in the energy of the world around it in a never-ending stream. If placed around one's home, then that home would become rich with such energy and transform the area into a holy ground for cultivation. Everyone, please take a moment to think about the great benefits of such an item. With this, what worries would your families have? The fires in everyone's eyes had practically ignited to full blaze with that. To them, this spiritized dust had an effect that many times better than what some 10,000-year-old heavenly resource geofruit could do. They could, after all, make their homes into a powerful place of cultivation. Furthermore, this had also opened up the Fantasy Star Ocean as a potential source of revenue. Unfortunately, because of the difficulty of the location itself, obtaining spiritized dust was nearly impossible and put an end to mass exportation of the dust. So in this one moment alone, everyone had made up their minds to get the spiritized dust no matter what the cost. For the sake of the growth of their families, this was a crucial item. Let us start the bid for the spiritized dust at 3 million purple coins. Each bid will increase the price by another 10,000. If anyone has interest in the spiritized dust, then this is an opportunity that cannot be missed. This spiritized dust is an absolute must. The auctioneer smiled. Afterwards, another Herculean battle had taken place as everyone began to shout their prices one after another. Rising in price at an astronomical rate, the spiritized dust was already well over 10 million purple coins within a few moments. Jianchen had been seated in his corner in silence without ever making a bid for himself. Since he knew that he now needed a tremendous amount of this stardust, there was no point in fighting for this small amount. It would do him no good to obtain such a minuscule amount for the major price. It would appear that I must go to Fantasy Star Ocean in order to obtain enough stardust in order to smelt the azulate swords. Jianchen thought to himself. With his finishing sentence, for 70-year-old elders suddenly came out from the skies in each cardinal direction around Jianchen so as to trap him in. But Jian Chen had not been disturbed by their appearances at all. Thanks to his presence, Jian Chen had been fully aware of their existences. From the moment he had been in the city to now, there had been no way that someone could hide from him. No matter what they used, they were as visible to him as if it were normal. There had been a faint azure-colored sword in the third elder's hand as he glowered at Jian Chen. "I'll give you one last chance. Will you or will you not return the ruler armament?" At the same time, the other 4 men brandished their own saint weapons. With 5 heaven saint masters against him, Jian Chen didn't dare be lazy either and resolved to use the origin energy of the sword spirits. A beam of azure and violet light immediately shot forth from his right palm and formed a single blade. The third elder had thought back to the last time he had fought Jian Chen to death when he saw the origin energy. The look on his face solidified as he grew serious. "Fourth elder, be careful. Jian Chen isn't as simple as he looks on the surface. Third elder, worry not. The 4 of us all know of what happened to the Kai brothers. We won't be following them into the afterlife today." One of the elder laughed confidently. Afterwards, a surge of yellow-brown energy flowed forth from his body to form a protective layering over him like armor. With this armor for protection, the elder's confidence had been bolstered as well and immediately flew off towards Jian Chen to strike. Chapter 604. The battle outside the city. Jian Chen had only laughed. Without fear for his own life, he charged straight for the elder as well. With a thrust of his right arm, the origin energy surging throughout it had arced straight outwards in a brilliant gleam of light straight for the elder's chest. From within his earthen armor, the elder had been startled by Jian Chen's course of action. He had no idea that Jian Chen would be that fast. Up until now, the few individuals of the Shi family had figured Jian Chen to be an Earth Saint Master. It had been outside of their expectations to see that within such a short amount of time, Jian Chen would have gone from a second cycle Earth Saint Master to become a Heaven Saint Master. The speed at which Jian Chen had struck out with his sword had been far faster than what an Earth Saint Master with a wind attribute would even be capable of. Shocked by this, the elders were now re-evaluating Jian Chen to be an even bigger threat. Despite the speed of his stab to be out of their expectations, the elder wearing the earthen armor had been equally fast in his reaction. In a flash, his giant sword had exploded forth with a yellow light that originated from his body. The light on the sword had grown even larger with the amount of energy being fed into it before it finally smashed against the origin energy Jian Chen wielded. Boom! With the collision between Jian Chen's origin energy and the elder's saint weapon, a tremendous amount of saint force had been expelled from the area and over the entire earth. With dust pervading the air from the blast, the area between Jian Chen and the elder had been completely blocked by the dust and had made visibility almost impossible. The other 4 elders from the Shi family had used a thin layering of saint force protecting them from the incoming dust and had stared intently through it with stunned expressions. Third elder, is Jian Chen truly a second cycle Earth Saint Master? One elder asked in disbelief. The third elder gave a small hum as he tried to think. 1 year ago when I fought him, he was only an Earth Saint Master. But with just barely a year after that, his strength has basically toppled the heavens to make a tremendous change. What's startling is the fact that he isn't a cripple even after his saint weapon was destroyed. His strength should be extremely low and not what it is now. Every man is destined for fortune after surviving a great disaster. I suppose that saying is true because of cases like these. Another elder sighed. Within this moment, a single person came flying straight out from the dust and out towards the third elder. The elder had narrowed his eyes for a moment before letting out a grim sound of laughter. Unharmed? It seems Elder Ma hadn't left even a single scratch on you. Jian Chen, you really did grow even stronger than before. Surrounding his body with the wind element, the elder shot up 50 meters into the sky without a second to spare. Jian Chen's figure had flown straight up into the sky as well. Aided with the wind element from the world, Jian Chen had chased after the third elder without reprieve. What? He's a Heaven Saint Master too? The other 3 elders had been astonished. Not a single one of them had expected or thought to see that someone that was only a second cycle Earth Saint Master would become a Heaven Saint Master that was capable of such a speed that could leave the 3 Heaven Saint Masters tongue-tied in a single year. Seeing Jianchen fly through the air had caused no small amount of shock to the third elder as well. Stupefied, the elder couldn't help but remark, "But how's? Just a year ago, you were merely just an Earth Saint Master before you had your Saint weapon destroyed. How did you become a Heaven Saint Master instead of becoming a cripple?" The third elder was no longer as calm as before. His face was filled with abject disbelief, and even in his heart, waves of shock had surged everywhere with great power. Unable to stop himself from sneering after seeing the look on the elder's face, Jianchen laughed. "Third elder, I should really pay you back for that debt from 1 year ago. Don't even think that you'll leave here alive today." With the final word spoken, Jianchen had already closed in onto the third elder and brought his origin energy sword straight at the throat of the other man. The third elder was already aware of just how devastating the origin energy was and knew better than to cross swords with it. Borrowing the speed boost his wind affinity gave him, the third elder tried his best to gain some distance away from him. Then, with his saint force pulsating into his sword, the elder shouted out loud, "Earth Tear Battle Skill Cloud Piercer." The wind attribute saint force that had been around the third elder had immediately condensed into a thicker wave of energy that helped propel his body towards Jianchen with the speed of an arrow shot out from a bow in an attempt to spear him straight through. Jianchen had laughed coldly once more when he saw the third elder decide to approach him instead of retreating. With the origin energy, Jianchen moved to stab the elder when all of a sudden, something behind him had prompted him to turn around and stab at the empty space behind him. Ding! A crisp sound could be heard as from what was once an empty space in the air had now a single figure levitating over it was the third elder. The third elder that had been approaching him from the other side had been nothing more than a mirror image that disappeared as soon as Jianchen looked at it. What a strange battle skill! Jianchen praised with some astonishment. The cloud piercer that the third elder had used was nothing more than a diversion. The first body had been a mirror image that would move as he pleased while his actual body used some sort of strange method to hide himself. It had been a silent and strategic course of action that allowed the elder to traverse to behind Jianchen to attempt at a fatal strike. If not for the presence that Jianchen had spread out, then the third elder would have most likely delivered a fatal blow onto him. A mouthful of blood escaped from the third elder's lips as his face paled due to the blood loss. Glancing at his saint weapon, there was now a new jagged chip to its edge. "Elder Hunyuan. Elder Hunyuan is dead. Third elder, Jianchen has killed Elder Hunyuan." From down below where the dust was finally beginning to recede, the first Heaven Saint Master that had fought with Jianchen could be seen on the ground. From between his eyebrows, a single hole could be seen leaking blood from the spot. "What? Elder Hunyuan is dead?" The third elder cried out. Turning to look down, his body grew rigid with shock when he saw the sight for himself. Taking advantage of the elder's period of shock, Jianchen charged forward with the origin energy to pierce through the elder's eyebrows. In the blink of an eye, the distance between the two had closed to less than a meter. Letting out a startled yelp, the elder swung his head as if his life was hanging by a thread. Despite just barely dodging the strike by a hair's breadth, there had been a single gash on his forehead. Whoosh! The second delivery of Jianchen's sword had been just as fast as the first and followed the elder's movements without leaving him time to even breathe. The elder had been dreadfully terrified of the origin energy and wanted nothing more than to distance himself away from it. With no other choice but to rely on his own speed, he retreated backwards to widen the distance. Unfortunately for him, Jianchen had harbored no desire to allow him such a course of action. Encasing himself within the wind from the world, he dashed towards the third elder in order to pressure him into a situation where he couldn't even retaliate. Assist the third elder. The other 3 elders had snapped out from their shock and immediately shot into the skies to help the elder. "Don't bother helping me, just use your heaven tier battle skills. Only those could hurt this bastard." Who would have known that a single year was enough to cause such a drastic change in his power? The elder cried out in anger. His heart had been thrown into disarray with today's events. This was a first in his 300 years of living. A single youth not even 50 years old was giving him a thrashing that had not only affected his physical self, but his pride. Without delay, the three Heaven Saint Masters immediately split off into three separate corners and began to charge up their Heaven tier battle skills.